So we are going to be doing something a little bit different today, and I feel like I intro over 50% of things by saying we're going to be doing something a little bit different, but we are. So I'm going to be going to Sweden tomorrow to meet up to talk Victoria 3 with the devs, and before I do, I was wanting to have a bit of a discussion about the Diplo play, because in the event that I get information that I'm not allowed to talk about, I won't be allowed to talk about it, and if or I will just generally refuse to give any sort of hints as to anything that I wouldn't be able to talk about. But the Diplo play is something that I've wanted to see reworked for a long time. I had some notes on it. I've since lost those notes. And so we are going to have a little bit of a discussion regarding the rework of the diplomatic play, but also just the larger kind of broader context of escalation towards war and resolution of war in general in Victoria 3 to make it more of a game that is centered around a sort of jockeying and maneuvering and culmination in rising tension that maybe leads to a great war, rather than kind of linearly playing in terms of extracting value out from the world through wars, like, successively. Ideally, I think what you would want to have is have it feel like a scramble, and then the world starts getting smaller and smaller as all the colonial powers seize, kind of spheres of influence over various areas, until finally there's nothing left to gobble up except for each other, and you get a massive type of war. Hey, Kirith, how's it going? Hey, Estefano. How's everyone doing? And so we are going to be having a little bit of a discussion regarding that. We're going to be in Microsoft Word for some extent, and so the fearsome friend of Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word. So, let's kind of flesh out some of these ideas, right? We have problems with the Diplo play. And just to kind of, is that the hotkey? For this is, we have problems with it not feeling like a jockeying or maneuvering, but rather delayed DAO. Okay. And then, let's get the chat where we want it. Hey, Ivilo, how's it going? Thank God, the amount of times the World War started over the most minor issue is ridiculous. Well, I think it should start over a minor issue, but only once there's a certain elevated level of tension and nationalism, and that should be the driving force. And we will continue to add to the problem with the diplomatic play, but this is kind of thematically one of the ones that feels generally kind of big. Also, just infamy costs in general are strange. I think that, for example, reasonable sorts of things to go for should maybe not cost as much infamy, even if they're in Europe. And currently, the infamy is only, like, it's just bifurcated based on recognized, unrecognized. On recognition, rather than reasonableness. And we have, like, also just, like, a kind of a lot of problems with the Diplo play just in general. Like, tick below 0 does not capture war support well. You have a banking currency idea made? You started making mods? Very nice. And so, what I would like to see is this idea of diplomatic pressure as a resource. Hey Julian, how's it going? We're gonna have a bit of a discussion, or we are currently having a bit of a discussion about the diplomatic play. because I'm going to Sweden tomorrow, and I might not be able to talk about stuff as openly if I know more information than I can at this point in time. And so I was going to do an extended video on this, but I don't have time to do that. So the idea here is acquired through various means. And then used to start plays. To start plays and stifle plays of others. And for this, we need updated interests. Mechanics. Hey Bakken, how's it going? Currently, you just declare an interest, and then you can, like, have a war, and then, that's kind of, you declare an interest, and then you can just declare wars there, and there's, like, nothing more to it. I think that there should be levels of interest. And that you should have something maybe interested, involved, maybe, say, controlling, and then existential, if it is your home territory. Something like this. Hope you have fun in Sweden, that's the plan. Why is global infamy a thing anyways? I think global infamy... The thing is it should be more global. It should be more global than AE. I don't like exactly how global it is anyways. I don't necessarily want to rework Infamy. I think you could rework Infamy, but, just like, in terms of interventions, I think levels of intervention should be, like, minimal if you're going to be reworking a lot. I, for one, am interested in the interests. They're interesting. Well, the idea is that they throttle what types of war goals you can go for. So, interested, like, you can't go for... Here, let's maybe jump into game and take a look at some war goals. So, if we just have, like, a lowly interest in an area... we wouldn't be able to go for conquer state, but maybe we could go for investment rights or humiliation. Something like this. Just low stakes kind of war goals, but you definitely can't annex someone if you're just interested. Additionally, throttles the cost in infamy that you can go for. Cost in infamy that various war goals cost. And high stakes war goals here for controlling. But another thing I would like to see is updated horticultural mechanic as well. Throttles the tolerance of allowed street sweeper of domestic approval for the war. And a secondary thing is the degree to which you can mobilize is influenced by this. So maybe 10% mobilization. You know, 25%. We can't spell mobilization because we're bad. And here maybe 60% mobilization is possible. 60% seems like a lot. And this is 100% mobilization. Right? Which means, if you don't have a high tier sort of interest in an area, you're not going to be able to really go for like another European GP just by virtue of you not having the level of interest required to get a mobilization that you need to be able to do something. Diplo pressure might be something you build up when you're not decaying infamy. I don't love how infamy decay functions or use it as a lose-it resource. Well, I was thinking that if you're using your Diplo pressure a lot, if you're engaged in a lot of conquest, you're going to have less to be able to use in various other ways. Right? Max level interest pie thumbing. Well, I think diplomatic pressure should be acquired through trade, is one thing. So Great Britain trade specifically with oppositional, e.g. exporting opium, generates pressure vis-a-vis someone importing it. I don't know if pressure should be... if it should be general or interest region-oriented. Or power to power. Do you think the Diplo game of Vic 3 needs stages? Yes. Congress of Vienna, Unification Era, Scramble for Africa, a prelude to World War I. Well, one of the things I was thinking of is it requires a significant investment to increase your level of interest, and this prevents great powers from having massive wars with each other, unless you have instances like, coming back in the game real quick, if you have instances like where both powers see it as their thing, like Alsace-Lorraine or the Brothers' War, then you can have these massive European scuffles. But if you don't have something like this, it will be a huge infamy and like cost to like go for something. So like Great Britain declaring for Normandy should insta-pariah you in terms of like the system I'm thinking. So you need to jockey and you operate on the world stage to like mess with France rather than just go for them immediately. Type of thing is what I was thinking. I'd love to see something like Hoey 4 Volunteer Force, where great powers send small amounts of units, but not able to fully join the war. Yep. So this is what I'm thinking with this. Interested, low-stakes war, mobilization. But here's another thing. Cannot intervene. I think you should be able to intervene in ongoing wars. But it costs infamy. But it's cheaper if you have high interest. So, like, just getting involved in some war, like, should generate infamy, I think. And I think infamy should, like, operate as a much more fluid sort of resource. The Stroud was the street sweeper. Can you send me this when you finish with a generalist? I'll maybe make it public. Hey Gene, how's it going? Yeah, we're streaming during the week, so... Usually it's the Saturdays, which you're usually working on. Maybe IGs can lobby to generate pressure in some way. So this is something we were thinking of. This... amplified by companies. But yeah, diplomatic pressure as a resource, definitely want IGs to be able to generate it. And so, I think that, ideally, you want it to be nuanced, and you want to be able to build up a sort of regional pressure as in an area. Takes time to upgrade interest level, ticking based on various factors. And so I think that if you have a certain level of interest and you go over the mobilization, I think that should be allowed, but I think your society should turbo hate you if you do that. But I do think that there should be a cultural mechanic in general, and I think that in that case, we can have some cultures that specifically, or cultural elements that affect this sort of thing. So jingoism decreases or increases how much you can commit. And decreases pop dissatisfaction with war. Sounds like you'd choose low-stakes interest with massive reserve of conscripts. Shout out to Florida Man Army. I think that people should really, really hate being jingoistic. And nationalism decreases the cost of interest. Streaming on a Monday, it's because I do not have time to make a full video on this. Maybe the level of interest could tie in with the presence of your army and navy. Well, I definitely want Merchant Marine to help. For getting the diplomatic pressure. But right now, the interest mechanics, I think your ability to bolster interests can be tied to military. But they will passively build up. Maybe intervening to defend or honoring a defensive pact could lower infamy. Here, let's make another section. Because I do think you should be able to intervene. I think you should not be able to do it for wars that are considered just. Intervening in unjustified conflicts lowers infamy. But I don't think it should do it by a lot. Or dramatically increases general pressure pool so you accrue less infamy. That's probably even better. Because you could stay low infamy and accrue more and more of this pressure by being like world police. And then you can force other people to do stuff. But can be used for more than just Diplo plays is another thing. So, when you have the interest, there's also going to be escalations. Declaring a war immediately will cost a ton of infamy. On infamy and pressure. If you're seen as belligerent, then people won't value your opinion, man. Hello, I'd just like to know I came back to Vic 3 thanks to your content. Thank you so very much. How would this system account for external regional war goals added in? Like when you start a war for a French colony and then add in a war goal for Brittany? If you take something that is outside the scope of the war... Here, let's talk about it. For scope. If you go for something outside the scope of the war, it's going to be huge infamy. So if you have an interest, and your interest is in, and let's say you're involved, right, in the Congo, and you're fighting France, you can commit 25% of your mobilization, but if you go, you can't try and enforce anything beyond the Congo, and if you do, it's going to be huge infamy malice, because you're trying to, you might only just be basic interested in France, and if you try and resolve a war goal, declared on the scope of a different region, here, let's maybe do this. From a region that you have lower interest level in than where the war was declared, with the scope it was declared, will be huge infamy. So if I declare, if I'm just interested in France, and I'm involved in the Congo, and I declare an involved war in the Congo, and then I try and peace out in a region where I've just had this level of interest, it'll just be like insta-pariah. Unless I put some sort of, well, the escalations type of thing, I think is, going to be where you look to jockey and add extra demands and this type of stuff, or threats. So, here. Let's, in which historical world would the world police state lower their infamy? I don't think that, I really have it lowering infamy as much as just decreasing subsequent infamy increase. The higher the level of interest, the scope of the war should be higher until it's a total war. That's kind of the idea is, as time goes on, interest levels of great powers go up. Contributing to tension. And making global conflict more probable. So, seen as erratic as a penalty to relations beyond accumulated infamy. Yeah, I mean, I think that you could also rework infamy alongside this, but I think that there's already a lot of moving parts with kind of what we want to be doing here. But, you should first request war goal, and then only some war goals here can be requested. And then escalation tiers take a while to move up in. And if you can be accelerated or skipped for infamy pressure cost. So doing something the slow way or the right way will make it more expensive. You can request, then you can threaten, and then demand, and then belligerent. And we'll call this gunboat diplomacy. And so what you do is you open a particular escalation with another with another nation, and you could just put in a request initially. Maintaining them costs pressure. If you have a sufficient amount of pressure, ongoing refusal costs the country being threatened. Something like this? Maybe. USA in World War II? Something like that. Maybe. Oh, Pond. I think it's been a while. Maybe level of interest affects how companies with investment rights invest too? Maybe. That's kind of adjacent to, like, what we're interested in. Here. Pacifism. Here, we can make this even jingoism versus pacifism here. Because the opposite will happen depending on your other culture. But also maybe culture power. Gundam diplomacy? Hell yeah, brother. Did you mention a system where if a conflict is brewing in an area, tension took some time to build and could go up or even down? Well, the idea is you're escalating tiers here. But here's the thing. Other powers can intervene in your escalation, stifling it. They will have cheaper costs if they have a higher level of interest in the area. So let's maybe think of an example here, which is, let's say we declare for South Africa, and then Great Britain says, no, you can't do that. So we put in a request wargle, and then Great Britain says no. And so now we receive 0 progress. We can escalate to belligerent to actually just declare it, but it's going to cost us extra pressure and infamy to try and move up the ladder as long as Great Britain is saying no. And then Great Britain will have an ability to intervene with us, and it'll be cheaper for them to intervene if they had already, kind of had a decline on this. And I think that one of the ideas here is that stuff will get resolved a lot at this level via jockeying for powers. And then you can negotiate stuff. You can negotiate them off the stifling. Like, let's say you leave this alone and I'll leave that alone type of thing. Would your army model have an impact on your escalation here? Like a militia nation wouldn't be able to escalate as much as mass conscript nation? Yeah, I think regulars should cost more to contribute. Let's see. But if you're in an existential war, they won't care about you using conscripts, right? You're just fine, right? So it's the using conscripts for some random pie thumbing that is less appealing. Are we designing a mod? No, just kind of, I wanted to get ideas out for how I think the Diplo play should be reworked. Here, do we have can't change war goals?
2 hours.
Army model could affect things like jingoism and nationalism. This would absolutely be the case, yeah. But this would be like, looking more closely at the cultural mechanic than the Diplo play itself. Which I think that the cultural mechanic just in general is like kind of easy, interesting as like an idea, but that would be like, this is how the cultural mechanic would tie in to this, more so than the thing itself. I hope the devs see this, or at least sent to the devs or something. Well, I'm going to be talking with the devs this week. Later. Which is why I'm doing this here, because if it comes out, or like, there's scenarios where I can't talk about things, right? And if I talk about things before I can't talk about them, then I can talk about them. We're gonna call Wiz on stream at the end. His thoughts on the final proposal. I mean, I'll get to meet Wiz later this week. I think IG should play some role in what war goals are legit. Well, I think that IGs should influence your culture, and that the nationalism, egalitarianism, and jingoism, pacifism should be a thing. But I also think, here, let's diplomatic pressure. It should be cheaper to go for involved with your companies, and then cheaper to fight people with different laws and stuff. Big sad no EU5 Mamluks analysis. Yeah, I just didn't do it. But this is interesting. Side note for Vic 3, make Vanguard ideology more common. I swear I can never get communist anymore. I would like to discuss banking with currency idea with you, generalist. You can hit me with it. I think I have most of the main ideas here. Oh, recognition should be a huge one. Recognition should matter a lot, the degree to which you can pressure others. But it is, like, moving through these phases that gives the game the quality of increasing stakes, and also makes it more colonial in nature as you kind of stake out your claim, and these things increase over time for the great powers, and the world gets smaller. Differentiate culture acceptance. Oh yeah, that's... yeah, we can do that. That's more in an escalation. But I think that, I think that right now, like, the way... this is a good way for making it so the Europeans can't go for each other as easily. But if you already have a maximal interest, you can go for stuff much more easily. And so this is how, like currently it costs, like, so much infamy to... or actually, you just get the war for free for Alsace-Lorraine as Germany, but, like, that's, like, a weird type of thing. It should just be a very cheap war, where it's like Mummy and Daddy are fighting over Alsace-Lorraine again. Where can I text you? Oh, you want to text me? You can at me on Discord, or you can DM me. I'll not give out my phone number on stream. Level of interest also makes sense for trade. Yeah, I think this should also contribute to trade advantage. Or actually, the regional trade the globalized trade advantage, it probably doesn't make sense. Like, EU5's like regional trade, it would make more sense for trade advantage there. Also be interesting to have an ideology Manifest Destiny US. So Manifest Destiny, as an example, would increase your interest levels in Americas. Decreases it everywhere else. So with this, right, you can have some interesting things going on, which is it makes it easy to veto European escalations. Right? But it also makes it harder to join European conflicts. I'll just text you the idea. Alright. Also, I listened to this while playing. The whole idea seems pretty amazing. What's this? This is some discussion for reworking the Diplo play and interest system that I was kind of thinking through, and I've been thinking through for some time now, but haven't really discussed it because I wanted to organize all my thoughts. But now, since I'm going to be going to Paradox later this week, and this can affect how much I can talk about things, if I talk about it now, then I can talk about it now, definitely. But I think that one of the big ideas here is that you just, like, can't, like, do this. You can't get these early world wars, right? Or this system where, like, you get these massive European conflicts because they just don't have the level of interest required for full mobilization. And you can get skirmishes and this types of things. But here another example is what is it? I forget the name of the journal entry. The Great Game. Becomes more about jockeying for influence in the region rather than just subjugating Persia. So, if you start like a request war goal, request subjugation or on Persia, or maybe you can't even request that war goal yet because your level isn't high enough. So you first start about increasing your level of involvement in the area, and you want to engage in a lot of trade with these guys. You try and get trade agreements to help push you from interested to involved. And then you can maybe invest like interest power to try and push specific interests. But the idea is you have to justify your level of involvement here. Or if you're just interested, you can go for lower stakes war goals like forcing trade agreements, this type of stuff, as you try and increase your level of involvement in the area. And then once you're maybe controlling, then you can put in the request for Persia to become a subject. And then Russia says, no, no, no. Because Russia's also involved in the region, or controlling in the region, and they care about this, and they say, no, no, no. So you don't really get much progress as Russia's saying no, unless you want to just directly go to war with Russia, or to push things in as an expenditure of pressure, and also infamy, which you can do, And if you do it slowly, you can eventually get to the point where you'll fight over Persia with Russia. Russia will have cheaper costs to defend Persia, and can get involved in that war, but this decreases Great Britain's ability to exert their influence elsewhere, vis-a-vis other Europeans. So if you're doing this, then you can't really fight France over North Africa, right? And you can't just pie-thumb everything. And you can get to a point where you're having a war over Persia with Russia, and you would, if you were both, like, controlling, you could both contribute a pretty sizable mobilization. Or maybe let's just call it involved. You can contribute a pretty big mobilization, but Russia just has to defend Persia, and then Persia's in an existential conflict. So they get 100% mobilization. Just here to say you love him. See you later. Alright, man. Godspeed. I think now the power vacuum is needed for Ottomans and Qing. If they get below unrecognized power, other GPs will try and carve them up. Can be prevented in real life with China open door policy. Well, I think that it should be probably pretty hard to get a high level of interest in China. The counterexample, and maybe this is a specific thing. E.g. Opium Wars. This is kind of what we had in mind, but beyond this, it's hard to go for, because your level of involvement in China is actually relatively low, you actually can't go for land wars for land, and it's really hard to go for interests, or go for pressure. So maybe this should be based on how many people, or cost is going to increase. Here, let's see. Cost to establish interest increases as there's more power there. And possibly harder to establish interests in areas that are isolationist. This certainly makes a lot of sense to me. And so China, by virtue of being partially isolationist and just being a massive country, it maybe is harder to get a level of interest required to really go for Chinese states, or maybe if you go for states with just involved level of escalation, it's really expensive on the infamy, because Chinese states are just cheaper, and it's really hard to get a full existential war from your perspective, but for China, it will be an existential war. So wouldn't people just say no constantly? Well, if you have a higher level of involvement than them, saying no is really expensive. And when they say no, when Russia says no, this incurs a cost to them. It costs them infamy and pressure to do this themselves. Suddenly it becomes more important to get into defensive pacts with countries with more developed interest than yourself and get some war goals for yourself. Yeah, regional... getting good diplomatic relations, specifically with people who have an interest in your area, becomes a lot more important. How will it affect joining teammates? Will they mobilize a percentage of the manpower? Yes. So wherever the play is put, the level of the play is put, it will be throttled by that. But I think that if you have like a full-blown alliance, and someone declares an existential war on your ally, you should be able to mobilize quite a lot more. So, maybe it's the case that, like, you are just down one tier from whatever your ally is. Also, you can just contribute more than these numbers, but if you do, you make your population really upset. I came up late and I'm 2x speed to catch up. I really like what you've been cooking up so far. This is something I've been thinking about for quite a while, and the idea is really to feel like you're jockeying around the interest, using diplomatic pressure as a resource, and that you have to go up the chain of escalation to avoid stuff being really expensive. That there's a sort of process to go after things without them being really expensive, and other people can intervene with them. Here, maybe we bold some like key ideas to make this a little bit more readable. But also this idea of you're going for something in a blitzkrieg type of way also just gives you a lot of infamy, but slow cooking, like sorts of pressure, does not. Infamy in general should also just be like multiplicative. Or infamy if not reworked. Because currently some of the systems are additive and multiplicative, and just like the way infamy costs are done is like it has some problems. How would France conquer Vietnam? Well, they would go about increasing their pressure or their level. They acquire pressure as a resource, and then based on what they're doing in the region of Southeast Asia, it gets easier for them to upgrade their interest level. And as they get a higher interest level, it gets easier for them to put in particular war goals and cheaper on the infamy for them to go for it. And then when they go for it, they just, they go for it. So maybe this is a globalized resource, and then this is the filter. Gets throttled, and costs are determined. And you could add even more granularity here too. This is just like kind of a rough idea. You could make it completely linear. In fact, it should just be a completely linear type of thing where you can go from 0% ability to mobilize to 100%. I think part of the problems with China and the EIC is that holding these states is free. Holding unincorporated states without enough admin efficiency should be near impossible. I agree, but I think that's like a separate discussion probably, right? How do you do it with multiple plays at once? You can only assign that percentage to the front. Yes. I think that's the way it would work. Or whatever your highest tier mobilization is, if you mobilize any troops more than that, your populace starts getting upset. I think that your population would be upset with you fighting multiple wars at once, right? And they'd be upset with a full mobilization just in general. So maybe it's just whatever your biggest play is, it's throttled by that, and if you use troops from your biggest play in a smaller play, that upsets people too, which might be hard to track mechanically. I don't know if that's feasible. Pacts reduce costs based on how long they've been established for. Where's the alliances one? Intervening. I want to send my secret police to look into what they can do about Franz Ferdinand. So the Franz Ferdinand, thing is, the problem is that all the GPs eventually trend towards getting this everywhere. And then maybe there's even World War. Or something like this. The day overseas warfare simply has quite a bit more cost. Well, it should be harder to generate interests somewhere further away. But there should be some way to acquire the ability to do this better. Example, like Belgium declares on Brunei, the Dutch fight against him since the Dutch East Indies. And Dutch East Indies are going to have a much higher level interest, so they can stifle it easier. And Belgium would have to invest a whole lot more pressure and infamy to be able to push through the stifling. And it might become not worth it. In fact, like Brunei is actually a great example. Brunei should be hard to take. And even though they won't have much pressure, they have a much higher level interest. And so their pressure is much more effective. Like, per point, you'll have to spend a lot more to push through Dutch East Indies because they have an existential, like, level interest in that region. And so a European with an existential, like, or recognized country with an existential interest in the region is generally going to be a lot harder to mess around with. And at that point, it might be better just to go for Dutch East Indies. Although it'll still be cheaper to go for Brunei. Having an interest in a region should be more heavily tied to territorial presence, but at the same time, territorial presence should be expensive to maintain. I think it should be tied to cores. Or your capital, even. So yeah, like, the US should have an easier time developing interest in Mexico than it does South America. So no South America eating by 1840s. I think the US will acquire, a higher level of interests, and they'll say no, no, no. And as a GP that's relatively big and could throw their weight around and will be acquiring more pressure, you're going to have a harder time to push through, like the US. It's not that it cuts it off from it being impossible, but South America doesn't become this, like, 10 infamy for a bunch of subjects type of play anymore, and it instead becomes like, if I want to push through the US, I'm going to need 30 or 40 infamy, and so it might be more worth me just doing something somewhere else. And it can become, like, even more worth it to go after Europeans. Like, if you have, like the Ottomans, them going after Greece should be easier or make more sense than it does currently. Although, currently it's pretty good because the company's there in Greece, but the idea is that costs just generally should be, like, more dynamic in terms of and just in general, like, we have this point in here in terms of what problems we have with the Diplo play in general, which is just, like, currently it's just, you just go after all these unrecognized powers, which you should be encouraged to do this, but I think it should be a little bit less binary. France also has events dealing with Vietnam intervention, so that could add more points of interest. Yeah, you could get a JE for France as well. And also, this would be a way to introduce more historic types of expansion paths by giving either the AI an incentive to go for specific interests or even just interest generation. They really need to bring crisis system from Victoria 2. I didn't play Victoria 2, but one of the ideas is like some sort of underlying tension mechanic that eventually you're like looking at this type of thing, but that from the start it's really hard to have these types of wars between Europeans. Yeah. I think that the higher level tier of interest should allow you to field that percentage army, but not how much you can actually field. That should depend on your logistics, like a fleshed out mechanic. That's fair. That we're starting to talk about like a bit of a different thing, right? In terms of the military, how the military works. But just as a general heuristic, like the fact that the Great Britain can send everyone to go take Brunei is kind of like silly. And if it was a lot more like lower stakes wars should just be a lot harder to convince the entire population that you need to go for everyone. What do you think about penalty to offensive power? I don't like that. Look, when Great Britain invaded Zulu, right? Like the guns still killed people all the same. But Shaka did pretty good. But like the guns are they are what they are. I think that internal pressure should be much more of a thing, and that's like how you should handle it. Yeah. Population. But another way is like this is increasing tension. Growing nationalism increases eventual of large scale also there's like a resource management idea here is that if you push through a whole bunch of wars it'll make it harder for you to maintain interest. Also, pariahing should just like turbo screw you like way harder than it does. Like, I think if you go pariah, everyone should just go join your ongoing wars, just, like, constantly. And you should just, like, get completely dogpiled. But I prefer mobilization percentage to, like, military efficacy, yeah. Previously invested points defensively should make next defense cheaper, but degrades over time, over, like, 50 years. I think fighting over an area should maybe increase your interest level. We don't really have a... Let's make a new section for increasing interest. There's a, like, sunk cost fallacy, right? Or increases interest. So if you keep fighting over the same land, someone else swooping in to try and snipe it should give you like an opportunity to say no. This is our region, and it like has more of a spheres type of idea. I think the reason I was saying it because the territorial presence plays a much bigger role in interest building. Yeah, so I think that holding territory should... let's see. I think that it should be significantly throttled by various things, though. I think interest should have an actual modifier to actual influence in the strategic region, rather than the way that they have that. I'm not sure what you mean exactly. I think that interest shouldn't be binary, you have them or not, but they should be like tier level, yeah. And that you're trying to push more of these, and also doing a lot of trade should push your area of interest. I don't know if you want that to actually push the interest or the... It's already giving pressure. Russia should get more interested in China once they incorporate Far East provinces. Absolutely. Russia should have an easier time messing with China, but they're also more proximal. I think in general, just being more proximal should help out as well. And like, in terms of expansion spots... Like, Great Britain should have significant advantages to pressure, as well as having just, various types of, like... It should be easier for Great Britain to maintain their interests. Look at how many native interests they have. Right? And so, any one of these territories, by virtue of Great Britain already having stuff there and running a lot of trade with these areas and this type of stuff, it should be a lot easier for them to be, like, intervene. And so they should have like the option to kind of do whatever, but and be much more flexible. But Russia should really feel like Central Asia and like China are your like expand spots, and maybe into the Ottoman Empire, right? Austria, like. The thing is like, everyone's expand spot right now just feels like Brunei into South America. And this is, like, it's absurd. And, like, South America should really feel more like Britain. And also, to some extent, the Netherlands / Belgium. Right? You having the cultural community of the Boers. Right? Should maybe influence stuff. So let's maybe... And maybe this is how you make it so that China, it's hard to get in it. China will have a... Maybe this is actually, rather than where your capital is, you're 100% existential, the culture of your own pops in your own region just makes it really easy for you to maintain interests even in areas that aren't your... Like, it's easy, like, if you start out as Prussia and you make mega Germany, South Germany should be really easy for you to have a really, like, big interest there. And so maybe culture is, like, a way of doing it. But adjacent borders... Not being able to join right now on holidays? Okay, Kurt. Thoughts about religion interacting with culture / rest of the game? I don't have super strong thoughts on religion. Britain's interest in Southern Africa would block the Gaza and Boer republics exploit, since British interest would be at least controlling level, if not more. Yes, but I think that Netherlands and Belgium should maybe have an easier time going for it. But like absolutely, like this idea of you getting blocked. Here, where's the stifle? Like, and I think that this should be, like, what makes plays interesting is other people saying no, and then you having to decide if you want to invest extra, like, infamy and pressure to try and push it through, or if you just want to take this, like, tit for tat, because if they stifle you, then the idea is this should be more expensive, if you decide not to escalate. And so it becomes an arms race of who's going to become more pressure. I had a more maths-related idea about the relationship between countries in the longer run, but I'll work that in Discord. Okay. Although this upcoming week, I'm probably going to be, like... Tomorrow I'm traveling, and then through Saturday, you know... What did we think about making treaty ports, changing regime easier than other types of wars? So I think certain war goals... if you have a certain level of interests, this throttles what type of wars you can do. Or what war goals you can go for. So if you're just kind of like interested or involved somewhere around here, you can go for treaty ports, but you can't take like full states, or it's very, very expensive. And so it's not just an infamy thing for war goals, it's a, well, I have a low tier interest in this area, so I can go for a treaty port, and then the treaty port will increase my interest in the area going future. And so also it feels like there's a bit of a progression. So like, let's say you wanted to get into China more as Great Britain. It's more of a linear, okay, I take Hong Kong because I only have this lower level of interest. And then with Hong Kong, maybe I get like a higher tier level of interest later and I can go for something more substantive. Yeah. Just saying, historically, what led to French involvement with Southeast Asia was a joint war with Spain against Dinam. Maybe you could do this, though, as a sort of... France escalates, right? Spain stifles. France negotiates splitting. Spain stops stifling and instead joins the escalation. And you just agree to split. And so I think that, like, in general, like, being able to negotiate with other great powers, various things would be nice. Maybe going over the level of interest mobilization would generate infamy and supercharge war exhaustion. Yes. This is, you can, basically everything, these are all soft, limits. And so going for harder war goals or mobilizing more would be possible, but the idea is it's much more expensive on the infamy and the pressure required. And going negative pressure or exhausting this as a resource should be bad. Maybe something for having stored pressure. I don't know. That could be interesting. Guns are what they are, but soldiers and officers are less motivated. Yeah, but they still don't want to die. But yeah, I don't know, maybe. I still think I like mobilization percentage. Mobilization is tied to country, not who they are fighting with. Once an army is mobilized, what prevents them to send it the other way? You can track what percentage of the army is on fronts. And if you just have a too high a percent on fronts with the wrong person, then it just creates a problem. If they add national pride value for pops, it'd be interesting as nationalism, but willing to go in the military. So this is an aspect of what we were talking about, is there should be a cultural mechanic, and that nationalism specifically decreases the costs of maintaining more interests, because as you have more of a nationalistic population, they care less about you thumbing other people's pie, and that this growing nationalism should be a cultural mechanic that drives you towards a great war, alongside growing interests and the receding level of opportunities for colonialism. Also, if there's a low percentage world tension while France and UK fight over a colony, they should not be able to annex Paris, cannot annex home counties, maybe liberate or humiliate. Yeah, I also think massive liberations are silly. Like, liberating Occitania is obscene, but, yeah, the idea is that, Great Britain is not sufficiently interested in France, to really go for a huge war goal, and if you do a war goal that is above your level of thing, it's going to be really expensive for you. Casualties decrease jingoism should be a thing, but it should increase interest. Maybe. I'm not sure exactly what I think should increase jingoism and nationalism and this type of stuff. I think that if you have a ton of casualties, this should maybe push you towards pacifism. I think I agree with that. Shout out to the ambulance, basically. We need ethnic tensions in Vic 3. We need it. I mean, to some extent, the fact that, I'm not sure. I don't think I want to... I don't think I want to suggest anything publicly regarding ethnic tensions, just because I think that devs are just going to tiptoe around, like, racism type stuff. You technically be able to send the whole army to navally invade Siberia. Good luck convincing anyone who has something to say that that's a good idea. I like the idea. Yeah. Because your interest level in Siberia is too low, it's difficult, it probably should be really hard to generate a high level of interest in Siberia anyways, and so sending a lot of troops there in general should be tough. Maybe even for Russia, like Russia might even only be interested or involved, and maybe this is how Japan wins. Japan having... what is it, maybe that's a reason why you could have, like, Japan outperforming, is because Russia doesn't care that much, and can only get a much lower level of mobilization than Japan. I'm not really sure. Any thoughts on fabricating claims? Well, that's kind of what this is. That's the escalation tiers. You request something, and if they say no, then you can escalate it to threatening. And as you escalate it, before actually declaring war, you get less and less a cost to actually go for that war goal. And so the idea is, like, you could request Paris as Great Britain, and they'll just tell you to shove it. But if you request it, and then start moving it up the tiers, then it gets cheaper and cheaper. But also, if you notice requests of others, this gives you an opportunity to develop an interest there and start pushing against them and trying to stifle them. So if you, like, Great Britain were to request Paris, and Paris says no, and then they start moving to threaten, then maybe Austria starts to develop an interest in Paris, and is just like, and starts stifling it, right? And then it starts getting more expensive, and certainly France would be stifling it, and so you just can't get to a higher escalation tier, because France is going to have an existential interest, and Britain will have a really small interest. And France is sufficiently large that pushing this through should just basically be impossible, and if you request with a really low level of escalation, you should just insta-pariah. So if Great Britain ever declares for Paris, they should just insta-pariah, unless Great Britain has somehow really high existential mobilization cost, and maybe their pops don't care if they're or if they're nationalistic, it gets higher to... if they're nationalistic, it gets easier to develop the interest. So it gets easier to have an existential level interest. Or, you know, as you get more jingoist, it increases your mobilization commitment. So maybe you're like 90% there. Yeah, this just being straight up linear would be better than having tiers. You're 90% there, but you can actually get a full mobilization and have your pops be okay with it. And maybe you could go for Paris, and it'd still be pretty expensive, but not like instant pariah, such that everyone joins in and fights you. But you would need to develop that over a period of time. And owning buildings, especially regional HQs, yeah. We'll put that in here. Owning GDP. So, if you have a large percentage of GDP in an area, it should help. So should population, rather than more than have a core? Rather more than do you have a core next door? Should population matter? I think it should be all of these things. And that you fight for a pie of growing interest. So maybe China, by virtue of having so many people, makes it the pie for which you're fighting proportionally, because there's so many pops there, really hard to fight for that. Even though they have a lot of things not going for them. Like, they're also not recognized. We can't spell recognized. You better recognize. Big 3 didn't do a whole lot with proximity, but since trade centers now take that into account, it ought to be possible. And you just have to do it... you could do it either based on... You could do it based on market center, too. It should be based on capital. Primary culture pops matter. Can we ask for a change to colonization that moves more of our primary pops into colonies? I don't... I think that it should just be oh. Yeah, colonization right now is kind of weird. It doesn't really move pops, does it? You just get the territory slowly. But it shouldn't move a ton of the pops. I don't know. Maybe it should also matter a lot in maintaining interest overseas. Absolutely. I think we have in here somewhere that there's a way to overcome distance. Yeah, some area to acquire this better. And I'm thinking Navy, but it could be Merchant Marine. Merchant Marine, or a combination of Navy power and Merchant Marine. But I really like the idea that by virtue of Great Britain having so many like treaty ports and trade ports all over the place, doing so much economic activity, being not autarkic, that they generate more of this resource. And that this allows them to do a lot more in terms of global like pie thumbing than someone else can do. And it's not just like across the board undynamic infamy costs for everything. I think this hurts the alt history aspect of the game. None of this is hard locked. You can change stuff, but it like grooves you towards like reasonable types of expansion, I think. The Edict concept is already interesting as a strategic value to a region, but interest forgets that lesson. Oh, you know what's interesting? You should be able to spend authority to do this. Spending authority to develop an interest in a particular region. I actually really like that. I like the building up an interest idea. It lets you have a sandbox feel. Yeah, and you could target specific areas or try to trade in specific areas. Or try and get your foot in the door with a treaty port early on in a specific area. Like, Like, let's say you want to go after, like, Southeast Asia, right? Well, getting an early trading port in Siam will make it so your interest develops more quickly, as you have, by virtue of doing more of the trade in the region because you own the treaty port, right? You now split more of that pie and generate the interest, or get more interest generation in the region than other people would. And so you can, like, there are, like, historic interests that are already in place. Like, obviously, Great Britain's interested in India. But you can, over the course of time, like, push stuff in another direction. And, like, Spain, for example, is going to actually have a reasonable interest in Indonesia. So in terms of people who can go for Brunei, Spain is probably one of the better options of someone who could fight the Netherlands over this. And Spain fighting the Netherlands over this type of stuff maybe makes a lot of sense. Maybe you should also have some level of historic journal entries, like Spain should maybe have more care, or this would be more linguistic based, for everything that's Spanish speaking, or should generate interest easier because of Spanish speaking stuff. Not that they're necessarily going to get super involved, but I don't think the game tracks language. But this is tied to culture, so because they share a culture with the Spanish, his phone, then yeah, you would generate interest easier, right? And so it would be easier for Spain to intervene in this type of stuff than it would for them to just, like, intervene in Egypt or develop an interest in Egypt. This would be tougher. Although North Africa, they would be generating interest, right? Because they have these lands in Morocco. And so, Spain fighting France over North Africa, that's something that can make sense too. Let's come back. Hong Kong Treaty Port will increase interest a lot with trade, yeah. And so, I do like the idea of, like, this sort of escalation feel. And also, you can negotiate for a treaty port too, right? And you can use, like, currently there's a ton of tools that give you stuff that you could also use for interest, right? Like, just the, like, oh man, it's been a hot minute. But, can we draft a treaty with someone? Bueller? You can use the drafting of treaties to be able to help your ability to generate interest. Right? Because if you do investment rights, you can get more trade going through markets that are in that region, or that cover that region. And maybe that's market areas. Trades with market areas will help this, maybe. Or market areas in the location. This something like this. What about accelerating war exhaustion? So if you have less of an interest, you can mobilize less guys. And if you go over that, then it massively increases war exhaustion, and people get very upset. Kamchatka and Sakhalin, probably not all of Siberia. No, yeah, that's fair. Let's maybe even change that. But the idea is that, their willingness to fight lets them just mobilize more people, or Russia mobilizes more anyways and makes people very upset. I think Diplo pressure should impact interactive power block leverage generation, so that leverage is more dynamic rather than binary for allowing different types of goals. You can put power blocks and leverage in there. I think I agree. I think if you have power block members in an area, that it should be easier for you to generate interest. Maybe at the top of here, you put a pie of total generation per week split based on combined total points. So maybe 10 generation interest generation happens a week or something like this. But also you can see that this will eventually push people more and more towards interest. And I don't know how I feel about if once you hit the cap, if you keep getting the pie. Maybe you want it to keep getting the pie. I really like the pop ideas you have. I think they're super cool. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Signed to Chatter. Where'd my drink go? There it is. I just randomly tuned in and see you're gathering feedback. Yeah, I have a system in mind for reworking the part of this that is really reworking the Diplo play is the escalation tiers, which we've maybe not talked about that much, but I don't think that it's really that as complicated. Is that you are pressured via resources to do things a little bit slowly and more mechanically, and that if you are requesting against someone who is very little pressure, it should be easy. No. Or maybe it's prestige that we have to think about. I actually scratched open a cut on my leg. Also, having high jingoism makes it harder to go for liberal laws. Some liberal laws. You could have a progressive jingoistic society. I think that there should be trade-offs, though, to some extent. You could just think of it as jingoism is probably just better or something like this. But jingoism, yeah, maybe it's harder to go multicultural or something if you're jingoist or something like this. I think nationalism should be more in conflict with multiculturalism, though. Jingoism's like a little bit of a different thing. They're correlated, though. Maybe jingoism and nationalism influence each other. Like, if you have high jingoism, this increases nationalism, and if you have high nationalism, it increases jingoism. We are talking about a new mechanic for interests and diplomatic plays, although we were starting with just initially complaints about the diplomatic plays, but honestly, like, we could easily just make a, 15-item list. There's so many things that I dislike about the diplomatic play, you know, in regards to, resolution of war and, this type of stuff. I do think cattle Euro colonization law affects how much native pops go to the colonies, so it makes sense. Instead of one country owning it all, a competition over one country could be nice. Pi is like having for large nations like Qing. Well, what you could have is someone blocks, stifles your play against Qing, and then you offer them in on the play, and then you split Qing up, and then you stop stifling and instead progress. Some kind of infamy, yeah. The average player also has a hard time understanding the game. Paradox has make things click button get modifiers, to quote Johan, because they have to get positive reviews and make money. I don't think that this is necessarily that hard, because you can have a complex system and then just have something to spit out and say, look, this is going to be expensive on the infamy, or it's going to cost you a lot of pressure, or something like this. Maybe you would get radicals. Yeah, the internal stuff should be radical driven, except for sometimes you want radicals. So, from the perspective of meta, one of the problems is like, yeah. Devastation. So Devastation's like just universally bad. Radicalism, like sometimes you actually like it, but Devastation, you could maybe have a protesting mechanic. So like if there's a massive protest or general strike over a type of war, and you just lose 30% throughput, that's like crippling. Or you get like a increasing throughput penalty. Being able to use escalations of others to use their pressure is probably a great conduit for new players in an area. I don't know. I think democracy should take away some control from the players so that the pops could have ideal more influence than just passing laws. I mean, then we're talking about politics more than like this type of system here. I certainly agree to some extent, but you also have to not remove all of the players' agency. Yeah, we do need certain levels to go for certain war goals. Is this theory crafting? Basically, yeah. We're talking about Vic 3's interests in diplomatic plays, specifically talking about pressure and infamy as a resource and how it should be more dynamic. This is like one of our big complaints regarding the Diplo play, but also I think that there should be more jockeying and that you should escalate war goals slowly. And if you don't escalate them slowly, then it should be very, very expensive on the infamy. But going after someone like really small and unrecognized, maybe you just like you just skip and go to belligerent and you just deck the war immediately and you suffer an infamy multiplier, but you don't care because it's multiplying relative to a small value. Ownership of buildings should give you power over said region, with company monopolies escalating this. Yes, this is in here as one of our features that increases interests, or increases your share of the interest. But there are going to be other people or other reasons for gaining interest in an area. I think the sunk cost section you could reframe as interests requires / rewards investment. No, but I'm saying if you spill a lot of blood in an area, I think it's actually easier to stay interested in it. Yeah. Laws affect interests. I think isolationism affects it in an emergent way through trade. The fact that you don't do a lot of trade in the region makes it easier for other people to get more from the trade. You could also have pies split for each of these factors and you get rewarded for each of these factors, or just have a combined total pie. I don't know if which is better. What if interest plus good vibes equals leverage, and interest plus negative attitude equals pressure? I think pressure and leverage are kind of the same thing, or should be the same thing. I'm not entirely sure exactly how pressure should work as a resource, as much as I think that interest should have escalation that throttles how much the resource costs. And also escalation level should have multiple opportunities to escalate a play and also prevent someone's escalation, and that this involves a jockeying for the resource or spending of the resource. And so Great Britain will have way more pressure than everyone else, but also they're doing more stuff everywhere else. And so if you decide to like really invest in one area as someone smaller than Great Britain, like let's say Spain, you could maybe get, you know, a piece of the pie. And also, if someone is stifling your play, you know that they can join against you. And if they don't stifle your play, it should be really infinitely expensive to join against you in a play. Okay. Unless, of course, you just, like, instant-deck the war. I like having authority allow you to increase interest. I actually, like, authority feels so bad in so many spots. I really like that, too. Someone else was mentioning authority on something, like, adjacent, and it's just, like... I think that's so perfect. Hey, Bray, how's it going? When are radicals good now? If you need a specific movement, and you're just going to abdicate the movement to force through a particular law, but devastation, boy, is devastation bad. I really like the idea of a general strike, though. But this is, a protest mechanic is part of, like, a cultural discussion, which is really kind of like a separate discussion. We could talk about culture. It depends on how long we want the stream to go. 3 gig of Krakow runs, and if shared culture reduces interest costs, the Poles in the Russia and Russian areas would like Krakow disproportionately strong interest there. Yes, exactly. And so maybe you could actually mobilize 100%, whereas Russia is only getting a 60% mobilization when fighting over that area. Claims are underused, IMO. Are really underused? I didn't even know. Oh yeah, there's basically, like, claims are, like, kind of non-existent. But you could do going through the process of escalation generates claims. I don't have as much prepared for culture, but I think that the culture mechanic is something I'm really unlikely to get any type of information on that I won't be able to talk about later. Whereas, like, interests and Diplo plays, I think... Yeah, I mean, I hope they're cooking something in those veins, but... So nationalizing buildings will give the target a lot of interest instead of generating infamy. Nationalizing a lot of buildings. I think nationalizing other people's buildings should make it so that they generate interest slower. I think it should probably also cost infamy, and probably be more expensive on the infamy the more interest they have. Something like that. Despite the fact that Japan were doing imperialism, they thought they would be more receptive to them doing a state building for a variety of reasons. Can you decrease the interest? What could decrease interest over time? I'm not sure I want interest to decrease. I think that generation can decrease, but the interest level maybe doesn't. Because I really do like the idea of it pushing you along to an eventual, like, World War type of situation. You could just have a decay, and you could just have a target, and you could handle it that sort of way. People get pissed when they lose their business's money. I think that it should... There should maybe be a war goal, like, to privatize, and that you should maybe get a high escalation level on it for cheap, something like this, as a way of handling that issue specifically. A bit radical, but how about occupation zones, like France after Napoleon or Germany after World War? Other powers can occupy after a power goes past 100 infamy, which links to the protest and devastation. You mean internal occupation, or just like just holding on to the other countries occupy and just hold on to it? It'll be unfun to play on the receiving end of that. I think that that's maybe a part of a Great War type of mechanic, but that's like the climax of a run, I think, ideally. I think interest should decay, however, as you get more involved, generally the line goes up. That'd make sense. Yeah, you could make it decay and just generally increase. I mean, probably just not having any of these things then would just decrease it then. I feel like a country's interest definitely decreases over time. The US used to care a lot about coup governments in South America, but doesn't care at all anymore. They don't care as much because there's less trade and GDP going on there. Proportionally. All the trade and GDP is going through the Middle East. But that's like also like ideology driven. Do we have in here? We don't. We have something about cheaper escalations with IGs, but that would be an IG driven like the US, well actually the US in more recent times was about fighting communism in South America, or that's what they called it. But before that, they were thumbing pies plenty early. Interest decay linked to power ranking. I think that the things that give you pressure should be a resource that you can use to decrease decay, or to just increase interest in this type of stuff. And I think most of the stuff that increases your power ranking kind of would increase your Diplo pressure. So I think there's like, that's kind of already baked in. I think this is kind of like the main idea. I guess we could briefly touch on culture. But I do think, like, I have the main ideas in here. And I could make a list of everything I hate about the Diplo play, but I actually don't think that's maybe not as productive. This one I didn't really prepare for the stream for, so it'll maybe be a little bit more loose. But the idea is maybe similar to movements. Cultures generate power, or various cultural groups generate power. And really, like, Morgan wrote Mod comes to mind. Do you think fabricating claims should ever be something that could happen? Well, kind of what we were showing with this system, or the idea is, the escalation tiers is decreasing costs in the same way a claim is. And the cost of escalation decreases as you have a higher interest. And so I think both of these kind of act to fulfill a function similar to a claim, and is maybe... I don't know if you need to add claims in on top of that, because it's doing a very similar thing. Language component of culture is good. Well, it would be tied to your cultural trait, right? Is this notes for a video, or what's going on? This is videos I wanted to make, but I'm leaving for Sweden tomorrow, and I wanted to talk about these things publicly before, I guess to some extent it might be notes for an idea, but I wanted to talk about the things publicly before I went to Sweden, because I'm going to be meeting with the devs, and I'm assuming, although I'm not entirely certain, that some things will be talked about that I will not be able to talk about as freely after I have extra information. So, by doing this here, and having it public, I've already released my ideas on this matter into the Aether, and so I could comment on my own ideas after this. So, is kind of the main idea about what we're doing here. We do have in the background the game. We could maybe play a little. But I really do like, I mean, this was a time of like cultural conflict as well. But I think one of the themes should be increasing nationalism as you fight over things with other cultures. But there should be freedom of information. And your journalism trait should, or what is it, I forget what it's called. Is it really just called free speech? So your free speech law sets up kind of what's possible. To some extent. Shiny, now the paradox of the IP. So you have European for Spain, so that should be an axis. Then you have all the Americas speak Spanish. So the Hisophone cultural group. I'm not sure exactly what tie-ins I would want on culture, though. I haven't really thought about that, but there should be some of that going on. Bro's so addicted to exploiting the game, he started doing it with legal loopholes in real life. Yeah, I mean, if I talk about something... I can talk about anything that's public information. If I've already talked about it before, then my opinion's already public information. Happy Monday, Steven. I know nationalism has been used for independence, but then the nation doesn't have independence problems, it's used to discriminate. Ah. Let's see. There needs to be some interplay with the national recognition. Yeah. More ways of affecting culture is assimilating a specific community. I'm not thinking as much in that vein as an idea of cultural traits. Maybe let's make a section. And these give the B word bonuses, which of course is not as well liked, but if you are... We'll come back to this, but like, the fact that nationalism is a value and it lets you expand more, that's a type of bonus, right? Egalitarianism lets you maybe push for different laws. Political movements as well. I do like, something I like about EU5 is, like, the culture power mechanic. It makes assimilation easier. But that's less, we can kind of just brainstorm some values and maybe what they'll do. But in general, I think that maybe this should be a pie. Maybe. So having one value comes at the expense of others. And so, waging war increases jingoism. Indians in Britain would be more accepted than Africans, even though they are both of the no heritage system level. That's maybe true. That's like less what I had in mind, but that I think I agree with that. But sometimes it's a little bit weird, because I think African Americans are less accepted in... Well, maybe that's not true. I feel like, do African Americans suffer more racism in the US than Indians? And I think the answer might be yes. Like, Indians. Free speech affects research. Influence by freedom of press. I get that forced war goal on a GP recognition is supposed to replicate the Russia-Japanese war, but that ignores all the effort Japan used to lay the groundwork. Yeah, it's like a super oversimplified system. Radio could speed up the effects of the values. Yeah, radio definitely should have impact on... I just don't know exactly what it means at this point. We're thinking like Morgan Road here. Characters. That drive accomplishments. Maybe if successful wars increase jingoism and unsuccessful wars decrease it? Maybe. I think I like losses decreasing jingoism. More so than whether or not the war was won. Because boy oh boy did people really not want to fight World War. After, well... Institutionally, African Americans do, but culturally it's probably closer. Yeah, that's like, I definitely think... Yeah. What does industrious even mean? It feels like Protestant work ethic stuff would be ahistorical, to say the least. I think it's that, some people are more concerned with the economy than they are just, like, their country winning or something like nationalism. And that I think there should be an economic payoff to, like, just wanting to trade and, like, keep to yourself and this type of thing. And that's represented in national industriousness. You could just call it economy orientation. Douglas talked about how he went to Britain in the 40s and experienced no racism, but when he went back a decade later, he encountered American-inspired racism. Bruh. Exporting racism. Yeah, like, every country should be able to interact with specific cultures more. The current law system is so catch-all, you can't do anything granular. Ooh, that's not something I want to suggest to Paradox, though. Paradox does not like, being able to single out specific cultures as a mechanic. Hey, Lele. I'm on vacation? Oh, I hope you have a good vacation. Dad has been telling racist jokes every second of the day. I'm not categorically opposed to racist jokes, but man, do they have to be really funny. And most of the time, a majority of racist jokes are just like, because it's racist, get it? And so they're just like, or it's like, oh, there's a stereotype, get it? And like, that's a little bit less clever. Like, the essence of, like, actual good humor is the violation of expectations that involves some type of, like, flourish. But occasionally you do get, like... Yeah, I'm not categorically opposed to racist jokes. Just in general, a lot of them, like, miss. How will you import cheap labor when you hate immigrants? By exporting the industry over there. It's a matter of time before the genocide button got introduced if they did. Yeah, I don't... I'm not gonna... Like, one of the reasons why I put my freight suggestion with a lot of the ways it did operating within the current system is because I didn't want to give a suggestion that was a complete overhaul of the system. How long are you in Sweden? Just the weekend. I leave tomorrow. I leave Tuesday. I arrive Wednesday. I have Thursday off there. Friday there is an event at Paradox, and then Saturday I fly home. I thought about staying longer. I thought about going to Germany too on the way back, but I didn't want to get too fancy with it. Racist jokes that aren't made at the expense of racists usually fall short. I think that so my perspective is, if it's not funny and it's like if you miss with a joke and it's a racist joke and it's not funny, that's like that's a problem. If it is funny, I have less of a problem with it, but you're running like a risk when you make those types of jokes. But like, I think a lot of like race-based humor is not very funny. I just think that there are exceptions. I can't even think of an exception right now, but like, yeah. The punchline is just a very blunt. They violate norms by not being us. Yeah, and it's like, bro, I remember like, I'm Mexican and my uncle's Mexican. I mean, he made a joke about being on Mexican time because it was like being late, and like I didn't find that funny at all. And I didn't find it funny because like the Mexicans I do know are extremely hardworking. It's like also just like the stupidest stereotype. There was this. I knew this guy. I was kind of friends with this guy who was a waiter at like a place me and my friend would go to a lot. And that dude worked 3 jobs. And when he could, because it was Denny's, so like his late night shift, he would like, he was like sleep in the booth, like sometimes. Not very often, I think it was just once. But like, Bro, like, there's so many people who are Hispanic that work so hard to support their families, like, around where I live, and it's just like, oh, Mexican time joke, and it's like, oh. But I also think that, like, people who are like, you should never joke about race ever, are just like, yeah, I think that that's, like, not the way you should, like, engage in discourse. Cultural SOL affects their traits. Ooh, I do like that. I think I like literacy and SOL both affecting stuff. And maybe literacy increases bonuses. But I don't have as much a sort of expanded out idea set on this, because I really... they've given zero indication that they are interested in anything related to culture, like, of having, like, these cultural traits. And this is, like, the primary thrust of, also, like, artistry. And so, like, I was thinking that this can tie in with arts and sciences as well. And also, having cultural traits at Game Start, this is probably something that would potentially be offensive, but it allows you to give unique bonuses to individual nations while keeping it sandboxy, because you just change the starting condition. And if you're just changing the starting condition, then, you still leave it sandboxy to be able to shift stuff in a different direction. Higher SOL, lower jingoism. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think lower SOL people are maybe more reactionary. Don't they have starting vices for culture or luxury goods they like more? Little bit on the luxury goods, but what is it? Decadence. Was it hard men make soft times make soft men? I've always hated that expression so much. I don't even know why exactly. I think it's just, like, insipid and, like, just, like, there's, like, not much correlation between that and reality is maybe my biggest gripe with it. But, like, also, I think it's also just, like, people complaining about the next generation in the previous generation because they're the only hard ones. And for everyone, they think that they're the hard one. But this can affect consumption. But in general, you don't even need to put a penalty on decadence. If most of your values are giving bonuses, the fact that you're having decadence is eating into your potential bonuses. And if it affects a minimum SOL, that will be annoying. I'm Latino and I know the memes of Hispanic time when someone shows up 3 hours late to a party, like what happens I joke about with friends, but I only do it like, hey, look, the stereotype. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't think people should not be allowed to make Mexican time jokes or that they're never funny, but I didn't think my uncle's version of it was funny, and I told him so. Is more democratic lower jingoism? I think it's more egalitarian. I think egalitarian and jingoism should tie together, but I think you can be democratic and jingoistic, relatively high levels, but more democratic should make it so that... Actually, I like that. More democratic, less jingoist. If jingoist's primary effect is going to give you penalties for being at war, I think if you're more democratic, you get more penalties for being at war. And, like, currently, like, you don't really pay that much, yeah, I think being more democratic should make you more pacifist. I don't think it should make you less jingoistic. But pacifism is the foil, and anything that makes you more of something else makes you less of the other thing. Hard times make authoritarian leaders declare wars in order to bolster their political position. I see your argument. I'm not sure I agree that it's like a categorical thing as much as like a categorically war thing or as much a reactionary thing. Have construction changes been discussed? What's been changed? That I'm suggesting? No, but you could maybe tie that in. Maybe under industriousness. What about revanchism? Something like EU4, like the opposite of jingoism? Let's put in there. Yeah, you lose a war. I'm not sure what penalties or bonuses I'd want to give. Like, arts and sciences, I think you just get bonuses when engaging with these mechanics. But I think that, like, a big part of this is, like, the jingoism and nationalism getting driven up is, like, part of the mechanic, and so that there's more tension with regards to choices between being, like, internally oriented and externally oriented, which, like, in Vic 3 right now, like, the current meta is just so obviously being externally, like, oriented and just, like, conquering and using your infamy as a resource. And if you keep engaging in wars, you'll just pump up the jingoism and nationalism, and that just will eat into your ability to gain bonuses through other means. I don't really know how we're thinking of how these things get generated. I think literacy makes it easier to get maybe some of these other values. I'm not sure what would drive decadence. But it would just be bad. Gonna head out to work. Thank you for the stream. See you, Lucas. Have a good time at work. It's overly reductive. Yeah, maybe that's like the problem I have with it. I just have mixed feelings. There's like something where it just doesn't feel quite right. I think corporate states should remove free company and increase consumption and call it corporate consumerism. That's interesting. I think that you don't ever need to increase consumption as much as you just increase minimum expected SOL. I think that's mechanically it's the same thing and it's less confusing. Unless you wanted to increase bands of consumption of particular types of goods relative to the baseline. How would cultural traits work? Not everyone in a culture shares the same beliefs, though so isn't normal ideologies. I don't know if you would need to track it based on pops. Tracking it based on pops would maybe be a bit of a problem. Or tracking it super close, what all the pops agree with. I was thinking that the framework that they have currently for movements would maybe work well enough for cultures. I think it might lead to more polarized outcomes that would not be ideal, but like armed forces pops would just generally be driven towards being more nationalistic and jingoistic. And so yeah, maybe let's put IG's heavily influenced. Also, primary culture pops are going to be more nationalistic in general, probably. And then what happens is it will, like, total share of a cultural pie, maybe giving more weights to certain or based on wealth. So academics probably drive the culture more than average, and so if you build a lot of universities, you would also have the downstream effect of you would have more artistry and science as a proportional share of your pie if you have more universities per capita. And so that this could be something that you would you would see an emergent effect on. So but I don't think I like the idea of having a bunch of spectrums. Like, you're either nationalist or egalitarianism for your whole nation. I think I like the idea of certain intellectual groups being favored by pops, and then the pops join those groups. Because I just realized how close to the Stellaris value wheel this is. I mean, you could use something like the Stellaris value wheel if you were interested. Construction sectors work like trade centers, making them local player controls money supply within banking laws restraints instead of construction sectors. Now we're talking about something other than culture. But one of the problems is the lever you have as the player is construction. And so I don't know how I feel about reducing player agency from a gameplay perspective. From a simulation perspective, I do think it's good. But from a gameplay perspective, I don't know. Journalists woke up... I mean, it's easy to design a new update. It's harder to implement it. I don't know how implementable all these systems are. I think the fact that this is... Culture... I want culture to operate similarly to the way that currently political movements work makes it easier. I also think they can influence political movements or be influenced by political movements. What are we doing here? This looks suspiciously like a spreadsheet. It's his younger brother, Word. Is this for a mod? No, it's... I'm going to Sweden tomorrow. I might hear about things that I might not be able to discuss via NDA. If I discuss all of these ideas I've had for some time publicly, then I could comment on them later, because it will be information that's already out there. EU5 societal spectrums? Yeah, EU5 has the values on a spectrum. I don't think that that's like, I think a lot of things... I think people conceive of a lot of things as being on a spectrum that just actually aren't on a spectrum. Like, okay, here. What is it? So, like... This is one I've thought for a long time, but let's kind of... Actually, let's see where... Okay, that's kind of where my cutoff is. But, like, a lot of people, like, when they look at, like, masculinity and femininity, I think this is my favorite example of this. They see it like this, where, like, you're androgynous here, you're masculine here, right? Oh my god. And you're feminine here. And this is how they internally think of masculinity and femininity, right? And it operates on a spectrum. And if you think of it in this way, then doing anything feminine makes you less masculine, right? Because of how you're conceiving of the thing. And so, like, a lot of guys are, like, terrified of doing, like, things that they think of as being feminine. But, like, a lot of what's, like, regarded as, like, masculine is this type of, like, breaking free or being able to do what you want, or having radical competence for being able to do what you want, and also taking on responsibility. Like, these are, like, features of a lot of models for masculinity. I don't think there's, like, a one correct model for it. But if you're afraid of putting on makeup, you are in a way constraining yourself, and this self-constraint seems antithetical to a lot of models of masculinity. And so a different way you could look at it, not necessarily saying this is the best way, I don't think this is the best way, but it's the easiest way to explain, is that instead masculinity or femininity are like bar charts. So you just are more masculine or you are more feminine, and becoming... It's not that you're on a spectrum and you move in one direction or the other. Like, you put on makeup and now you're less masculine because you're more feminine or something like this. Or you behave feminine in some sort of way, and this makes you less masculine. Because I think so many guys are, like, just terrified of not being masculine, and I think that this terror or they're terrified of being feminine. And I think that this terror is in itself very emasculating. But I think, like, there's a tendency to model things on spectrums when they don't actually operate on spectrums. What happened to the Stellaris runs? I didn't... A bunch of stuff came up. I think I got access again to EU5 was what happened. And then I just completely stopped doing anything publicly and just, like, dropped off the face of the earth. Did you let the filthy Xeno scums take over? Yeah. I think what turned me off from Vicky was the big time when they took a ton of construction agency away from the players. Yeah, so I think that Vicky... You don't want to make Vicky 3 so abstract that it just feels like you're lightly touching the threads of reality and that it feels like there's no player agency. They have to communicate things better to the player regarding player agency. I think this is one of the challenges, and it's a UI challenge. And you have a better idea for when you're making progress in this type of thing, just generally in Vic 3. Because currently I don't think I think that the, better ways of tracking, like increased literacy, or the movement of your pops over time and tracking these types of things, and looking at these parameters, I think is one of the ways Vicky 3 could be a lot better game. It's not a disclosure of privileged info, it's a continuing discussion of previously stated opinion. Exactly. Exactly. This is very much the idea. So I'm maybe engaging in a way that was not preferred, but I don't think anyone could have a problem with it. Not, like, non-binary is not the same as androgynous. Yeah, I mean, I think this is true as well. Although not to get into, like, a massive discussion on, like, gender, just saying that, like, if you think of it as a spectrum, this will have certain entailments that you might not be aware of, which is that anything you do that's feminine will make you less masculine. And if you think of it as being like a double bar chart, those entailments are no longer the case. Becoming more feminine doesn't make you less masculine. It's a line and literally one-dimensional, yeah. Hair metal was peak masculinity, by the way. Yeah, so like hair metal... Or you grow long hair, does that make you more feminine? And it's like, I don't think so. Like, and we're always reminded in Fallout New Vegas when you had both fame and infamy with each faction that didn't cancel each other out. Oh, that's interesting. I think that makes sense too, though. That it should be like that. I don't think that they should cancel out. Canceling out, if people know why to be afraid of you and know why to love you, it's not like they just forget who you are because you have both. Yeah. I think a great example is Myers-Briggs. Often they're seen as a dichotomy when you can be both. Yeah, I agree, and I think Myers-Briggs is like astrology for people who are more information-oriented, basically. I mean, it's less arbitrary than astrology, but it's really kind of just a similar thing. You're looking at archetypes here. For those of you who don't know, Myers-Briggs is like the personality test that is the most popular. I mean, I think it's just all... Wow, every single one of these is taking the test, and I can't just get a list of 16 of them. Jesus. There's 4 spectrums. Nope, they're just all take the test. Okay. But you're either extroverted or introverted. You're either sensing or intuitive. You're either thinking or feeling, and you're either judging or perceiving. When I have done this, I've always been like the middle of the spectrum on extroversion and introversion, and judging and perceiving, but I've always been intuitive and thinking. But it's also just a bunch of questions like, what would you do in XYZ situation? And it's just like kind of an insipid type of thing. I think it's probably the best, like, personality typing type thing, but there's a bunch of these other things, but, like, people act like these are, like, objective within the world, and, like, they're just, like, they're not. Like, the categories of extroversion and introversion are just made-up categories of things. Like, and they're exemplified by a variety of behaviors and shared common language, but they're just, like, made up. Every model's wrong, but some models are useful. Yeah, I think Myers-Briggs is useful to some extent. I think astrology is useful to some extent. I think I know enough people that are really bullish on Myers-Briggs or other archetypal things, and they make fun of astrology a lot, and that's kind of why I'm a little bit like this. Myers-Briggs for pops, that'd be hilarious. Amazing. Classic strategy gamer zodiac sign? Yeah, basically. Like, I'm an intuitive person, so I'm gonna do this. It's like when I hear someone say that because I'm XYZ archetype, I'm doing XYZ thing, or because I'm this type of archetype, I should do this, or this type of thing, I just, like, honestly, I just hear the astrology people in my head. And it's like, I'm an asparagus, so I should, you know, walk to the gym this morning. And, like, it's just, the Myers-Briggs people look down on people they have more common with than they would care to admit. Not that I hate archetypes, I just think you should recognize what it is, which is a framework and a scaffolding for thinking, and not just something that's objective out in the ether. Like, you aren't these things, you're just thinking of yourself as in these types of things. I think I was ENTP when I was younger, and now I'm INTJ. Where's ENTP? I was more extroverted when I was younger. That's what's the one. Action, director guy, and then where's INTJ? See, I'm getting suckered in. I'm to being able to tell myself a story about myself. The detective. I went from director to detective. Hell yeah. Myers-Briggs is fun at least. Should we do a Myers-Briggs test? Maybe let's do it. I hope it doesn't just pop up some of my info. That's kind of the annoying thing about clicking anything. How old am I? Alright. Feel more energized when around a strong group of, big group of people. Neutral. You enjoy spending time with friends after a busy day. I strongly disagree. This is going to make me introverted. You feel relaxed and confident speaking in front of a large audience. I do agree with that. You empathize with others and care about their comfort. Not just, like, universally. I care more about values than, like, lived condition, like, type of things. You prioritize others' needs over your own. Probably a little bit. Your friends often view you as the responsible one in the group. Yeah, connections matter. You tend to perceive right and wrong in clear, absolute terms. Well, I tend to have a very strong opinion about things, but I am also, like, morally not an objectivist. I'm gonna disagree. Set yourself to higher standards than others do, yeah. You struggle to accept your flaws, often being overly self-critical, yeah. You believe in continuous self-improvement and stay committed to fitness, skincare, or healthy diet. Well, I believe that one should be committed. Let's put agree. You prefer planning and a structured schedule. I'm certainly not that way, but I don't have an aversion to it. RPing your archetype is weirdage. Yeah, I agree. What would you do if a friend unexpectedly visited? I probably, yeah. You're a perfectionist with a practical mindset. God, I hate this sentence so much. This is actually like the type of sentence you put on astrology things, like for the astrology descriptions. Would you be lobbying these suggestions in Sweden? I might. I'm gonna print it out and take it with me. I'm still gonna say strongly agree. You regularly set professional or personal goals and achieve them? Well, I set them. When solving problems, you trust feelings and empathy over logic and reason. I don't know if I disagree or strongly disagree. Let's do strongly. When facing a challenge, you prefer to handle on your own rather than asking for help. What should we do, chat? Type 1 if you ask for help, and type 2 if you do it on your own. Chat, what do I do? It's the type of sentence you'd put on your resume? Yeah. Chat, what do I do? I'm not sure. Man, the delay is so real. Either that or chat's not here to help me. In general, I actually... 3. No! Not like this. I'm trying to get help, chat. In general, I, like, actually just am super bad at getting help from other people. So we're gonna put strongly disagree. The chat's not helping me out. I got a 3 and a 69, so... How would you react if you came home to a messy house? My house is messy, so... You tend to avoid conflicts rather than confront them directly. Disagree. You tend to soften the truth or use white lies to avoid hurting others. So here's the thing, is I actually don't think of white lies as being really dishonest in the same way that it is, and also you can just change the framing of what's going on. I generally am not amused by hurting other people's feelings. Like, I don't find it amusing, so, if I don't think someone's seeking information and critique, I, like, won't offer up stuff that, like, will hurt their feelings, just, like, generally, because, like, what's the point? I'm not amused by it, and that's not what they're looking for. So I'll often just not even white lie, though. I'll just change the framing of what's going on. How do you handle feedback? I'm probably... I don't like negative feedback, but I think I probably am a little bit better than average at handling it, but, like... I'm just, like... Sometimes I feel often depressed. You often hold on to things because of their sentimental value? Nope. You often feel worried or anxious. Chat, what do I do? I don't know. I think that's a disagree. Yeah. You fear failure and appearing incompetent. This is true. Man, the truth hurts. You're unsatisfied with your work, but you still hope to find your dream job. You often struggle to identify what you want and feel. They asked for my email. Son of a bitch! I knew that they were gonna ask for the email. God damn it. Obviously, I'm not going to type my email in front of you guys, but I also don't want to just give them my email. Actually, since we did it on stream, we're gonna follow through a little bit here. I'm gonna get spammed. Terrible. available. Cooked. Secondary email, too late. That's actually the real one. Oh, it wants me to buy something right away? Jesus Christ. I freaking hate... It actually won't even tell me my thing. Holy... This is an absolutely insufferable Myers-Briggs test. Really? We're not doing another one. Actual insane. It says my assessment's ready, but it won't give me the free thing. Yeah, this about sums up my experience and opinion of Myers-Briggs. Improve your life with Myers-Briggs. Before you were lost. Now you know what you need to do. Don't you have the generalist email you use for Paradox? Yeah, I should have just used like my Paradox email or whatever. You found the worst one? Not like this. Yeah, I've found other ones that just tell me what I am, but I guess we should have clicked on the first one, not some like random. Actually, let's pull this real quick. Lightning pull. Because I don't know if you guys want to sit through me doing another Myers-Briggs. Like, if you have to know, or if you, like, don't care. Myers-Briggs personality traits. That would be wild if the game tracked that. That would be so awful, though, because it would just add, like, 16 times as many pop groups. This isn't Myers-Briggs? Oh, you're right. 16 personalities. No, it is. It's Myers-Briggs. Can we go over the points of the Word doc? Yeah, we'll go over the points in the Word doc again. Okay, you guys don't want another Myers-Briggs. Perfect. Alright, so I think we're going to go over the main points and then call it. So, we have some significant problems with the Diplo play, just in general. I think we can make a list of like 15 different things. Daejang, thank you for the follow, big nice. But it doesn't feel like you're actually jockeying or maneuvering. It just feels like it's a declaration of war. Infantry costs in general can be weird. It's just like polarized based on whether you're recognized or not, and also population. And I think instead it would be better if infantry costs scaled on like the reasonability of stuff. And if some wars like in Europe made sense and were worth doing, and that also some expansion just didn't make sense. Like going in on China should be a lot harder or more expensive than it is. The tick below 0 does not capture war support well. This is a complaint we have less of a solution for, but like it's really, really rough. I think maybe causing devastation at home, if you get to a certain point, like if you get to 0 war support, starting to get devastation or protests. We talked about and mentioned a protest mechanic somewhere in here. That could be a way to force you to come out of the war, because you can't tolerate 100 devastation in all your locations or provinces or states rather. You can't intervene in other wars, can intervene in ongoing wars, but it costs infamy. It's cheaper if you have high interest. So I think you should be able to intervene in wars, and it should expend pressure and interest, and pressure should be the resource that you kind of have available. Also can't change war goals. I think you shouldn't have what you enforce until the end of the play, but I think you should declare a play in a strategic region with a level of interest. And this level of interest will throttle what type of war goals you can go for. And if you take a war goal that is over this, it should cause some very significant problems for you. Perhaps even turmoil at home, but just enormous infamy and pressure costs, I think. Infamy, if not reworked, should be multiplicative rather than additive, because we're talking about adding more modifiers. And if it was additive with current recognized versus unrecognized, well, right now, currently, infamy being additive, I already think is a problem, because what you do is you just, like, feed all of the EIC or the Raj to some unrecognized country, and you annex it for, like, 5 infamy or whatever. But a lot of this is predicated on the idea that costs in infamy should be dynamic. Do you think there should be a mechanic that allows larger coalitions or alliances, like the Entente or Central Powers in World War I? I think that I would love there to be... we talk a little bit about intervening. And stifling a thing. I really like the idea that you can stifle a play, and then you can intervene, and you can get these massive blocks on both sides of it, and you can keep the escalation low, and you just have this low escalation in the background that's like simmering, or maybe very slowly gaining value. And so this, because there's so much power on each side, that there's this impending type of unease. Taking 100 million people in China should give massive infamy. Often European powers just annex amounts of land without too much repercussions. Yeah, I think they should probably remove the cap for pop. The cap is just maybe silly. Or it should scale differently. So we think of diplomatic pressure as a resource that you acquire. I don't really have this part that fleshed out, but just some thoughts on it. It can be acquired through trade, specifically oppositional trade, e.g. exporting opium generates pressure vis-a-vis the person importing it. I think what this does is trade you have going through a specific market areas, or this type of stuff, gives you instead interest generation there. But doing more trade just gives you more diplomatic pressure as you're a larger share of the world's economy. It can be amplified by companies. I think we're thinking of interest here. Amplified by merchant marine. I think I like the idea of that. And it's cheaper, like merchant marine as a resource should be overrepresented in its importance for diplomatic pressure. But these things we're kind of thinking go more in the interest mechanics. And it is cheaper to fight people with different laws and stuff like this in terms of diplomatic pressure. So the costs of pressure and infamy are dynamic. Recognition plays a part. It's used to start plays and stifle the plays of others. And so here's where you start to get the maneuvering, is you can be on both sides of the thing. And it's used to stifle plays, start plays, and also... can be used for more than Diplo plays. We're not sure, but I think just diplomacy. But also for generating interest. Just about, as you were about to answer, I had an ad. This is the Twitch experience. I think ads are worse on Twitch, personally. Hey, Vorondil Ultra, thank you for the raid. Welcome, Raiders. We are doing a little bit more theory crafting and a little bit less playing. Just a heads up, talking about reworking the Diplo play and interest mechanics. But the idea is you're using this as a resource. I think also maybe just accumulating it is good, and also maybe operating at an equilibrium. So maybe let's add that in. Yeah, seeing this, love your Theorycraft, using it a lot for modding. Ooh, exciting. I think you maybe could scaffold the cultural thing onto the current system for political movements. I still don't know if you should maybe have power-to-power pressure. I think that would make a lot of sense, but that seems complicated. But there's a theme of you managing a resource. Pushing through a ton of wars will make it harder to maintain and grow interests, and will make it easier for you to pariah. I think also maybe you get some sort of bonus for having stored pressure, but maybe you get that bonus in terms of the way your culture like reorients itself. Like maybe it's easier to get economic orientation, science orientation, and artistry orientation if you are accumulating pressure rather than expending it. Like your spent pressure depletes your your cultural competence or something like this. Although I don't quite like the sound of that. We have an updated interest mechanic, a filter, and the idea is it's a filter through which global pressure resources get throttled and costs are determined. So just a huge effect on what you can go for in terms of plays, and also how much military you can commit without your people starting to protest. If you have, and here's just some examples, I think it should just be straight linear though, in terms of your interest as you generate more of it. Although mobilization amount should maybe not be linear, like maybe it should start with 10% and should be relatively flat and then spike up as you get to the higher level. So, like, this would be linear, except I can't draw, right? Progression in terms of how much you can commit versus how high your interest level is. And I think it should probably be something a little bit more, like, entry level here, and then, like, that or something. But it throttles what war goals you can go for. So you cannot conquer territory at the lower stakes or the lower tier of stuff, but you can go for something like a treaty port, and then the treaty port helps you to develop more interest. Is there any element of Victoria 2 missing in the current version? I'm not sure because I didn't play Vic 2. Hey Decimon, how's it going? It throttles the infamy costs that various war goals cost. Like, it will be more expensive. Or maybe this is throttling what you can go for. Anything that is not under your current tier level is just going to cost way, way, way more infamy. And I'm talking like 5x or something like this. Throttles the tolerance for domestic approval of the war. You can see here, only certain levels of military commitment will be tolerated before your pops get upset. And using conscripts in general should make your pops more upset. So general imperialism via conscript should be a little bit more punishing. Merge maneuvers with this pressure. I think maneuvers you just get rid of entirely. I don't like maneuvers. I think that maneuvers are for an individual diplomatic play, and this is like an ongoing entire network of things that you are trying to pressure for that like replace the diplomatic play. I think when you declare war, it should just be instant. But declaring war without escalation should have significant penalties. Okay. It takes time to upgrade interest level, ticking based on various factors. We have increasing interest down here, but one theme is that as time goes on, interests of great powers are just glowing up globally in general, contributing to the total possible large war that can occur eventually. And there should be a general trend towards a great war as like a theme underlying the game that is really pushed by the combination of increased nationalism and jingoism, and also this idea of spheres of influence in particular areas, where if you have stuff that helps you generate a high level interest in an area, then you should be able to operate there way better than other people. And in America, an example is Monroe Doctrine in the US. Your ability to bolster interest is tied to military, similar to the current system, where if you have a really big navy, this helps a lot. I think that there should be some agency where you can choose to put down stuff, and it should be influenced by your military, and specifically your military relative to the largest power. So there should be a modifier that just scales with relative juice, as it were. But I think that this should cost authority. So we'll get to that. Creates a feeling of a world getting smaller as great powers get more and more of the interests, and it becomes harder and harder to operate without getting meddled with by another GP. Cost to establish interests increases as there's more pressure there. So if there's more people fighting over influence, it's harder to get justification. I'm not entirely sure. Possibly harder to establish interests in areas that are isolationist. It'll be harder to run trade with them, so this would be an emergent effect. But maybe there's a modifier here as well. Texted you in the Discord if you about the banking if you want to check it out. I will take a look at it today. I don't know if I'll, depending on how long your message is, you might get a response or not today. I also have to prepare for my trip today. Harder to generate more distant interests. So this is going to be a thing. Idea of escalating interests, like a treaty port to generate interest, makes subjugation easier. So we also have a few examples here. Like Manifest Destiny increases interest levels in Americas and decreases it everywhere else. So the US generates more in the Americas, generates less everywhere else. It makes it easier for them to intervene against any European trying to do anything in South America, and makes it very expensive on them in terms of pressure and infamy if they want to continue to escalate, which is the two resources that you're expending. And it makes it harder for them to join European conflicts because they will have a very low interest level in Europe, which is, you know, that plays ball in terms of how the world wars kind of rolled out, is the US was slow to get involved. The Great Game becomes more about jockeying for influence rather than just subjugating Persia, because you can't go for a subjugation war immediately, and if you do, you're likely to get stifled by the other party. And maybe it's that you can declare, even stifled, you can declare wars one tier down without penalty, but declaring, maybe puppeting is, you have to have a controlling level or something like this. And if you're stifled, you can only go for these war goals at decent cost. And so you either have to increase your interest level, or you have to escalate the war through the other person's thing. Okay. The Dutch East Indies will stifle actions generally against Brunei, and even though they won't have much pressure, they have a much higher level of interest, and so their pressure will be more effective. And so doing stuff like going for a bunch of the classic targets, you will have to fight through people who have a sphere of influence there. Spain as well in the region. You could have a journal entry for France, for Southeast Asia, which makes you don't have to like conquer the area, but you would have cheaper costs there, and it's affecting your costs in a dynamic way. Rather than everyone having the effectively cheapest places to expand be South America and like Brunei, and also like now North China, instead it's dynamic based on like where you are and what you can generate in terms of interest. There should not be much infamy in conquering a state that's no one cares about. I think to some degree, the movement of lots of troops is alarming. But yeah, I think in general it should be cheaper if they're unrecognized, which is kind of how that's represented. But the way generating interest works is there's a pie of total generation per week, split based on combined total points, and you could split it based on points per category, or you could split it based on just total points. Fighting in an area increases interest there, or if you're currently fighting for a war over that, or maybe for a decaying amount of time even after you fought in war, you should generate more interest there. Holding territory in the region generates more for cores, or more for primary culture pops, probably. This would be a way in which China would get an enormous share of the pie, making it very infamy expensive to just go for China, which I think it should be a lot more to just like try and annex China. Trade should probably increase interests, and then also like company trade specifically maybe generates more interest, this type of thing. So, like, the UK generates more interest against China because of the opium trade, and also by virtue of the Hong Kong Treaty Port once that's there. I think we already did proximity and owning GDP in the area will also give you some. So it will be harder to generate an interest in a really, really big economic zone than it will a relatively small economic zone. So poor areas will be easier to exploit, just generally speaking. But also just very, very big areas like China, harder. Recognition should make a big difference. You should have to fight for the pie of the interest generation, and you could spend authority to boost this. And also power blocks should probably affect it. Pressure would be regional or global. I think pressure would be a global resource that you spend, and then your interest level would be regional. Escalations. Declaring an immediate war is expensive on infamy and pressure. So if you declare an immediate war, you will get a really big multiplier. You will get some flat infamy, and then you will get a big infamy multiplier for whatever war goals you end up taking. War goals aren't locked in. If you're seen as belligerent, people won't value your opinion. Man, wars are not declared for a war goal. They are declared based on a scope. Or they are declared in a strategic region that has a particular level of escalation, or, particular level of interest. And so, if you declare a war that is for this level, you will be able to go for war goals that are of this level or below. And if you go for war goals that are more, it will be really, really expensive. Like talking about 1x versus 5x type of thing. And so you're going to be restricted in this way. So if you declare war for someone's overseas colony, like let's say you're Great Britain fighting France, and you declare for, some colony in Africa where you both have relatively small interests, and then you land France, and France should always be able to defend its home territory with maximum troops, though. So I don't know exactly how you would do this, but the idea is you can't force in war goals that are of a higher tier, or in a higher tier region. So France may be only involved in the Congo, and this is where the war was declared. You can't go after existential territory for France, like their core territories, or it will be extremely expensive for you. And you should just collapse if you do that type of thing. Escalation tiers move up slowly and can be accelerated or skipped by applying extra infamy and pressure. So you can click a button to say, do this faster. Maintaining them costs pressure. If you have enough pressure, ongoing refusal costs the country being threatened. Maybe. And this should scale with the size of the country you're threatening or you're escalating on, such that it's really a lot harder to escalate on GPs than some just random unrecognized power. You can occupy home counties, but you can't annex it in the end? Yeah. Well, I'm not sure how much... if Great Britain is landing... Well, maybe the play pattern of Great Britain landing Normandy, that just should actually be excluded in terms of, the emergent gameplay patterns. And the colonial war should just kind of stay colonial. And so it should just be, blockade plus... which would make navies more important. If landing is just insane. Because France, Great Britain would only be able to use 25% of their troops to land or whatever. And then you can defend your own HQs with your full troops versus landings. But you shouldn't be able to defend the colonial HQs. There's some, details that need to be worked out there. Others can intervene in your escalation, stifling it, so that it will slow the progress or halt the progress. They will have cheaper costs to do this if they have a higher level of interest in the area. So your level of interest, to the extent that you are jockeying for position, your level of interest level affects things a lot. So the Dutch East Indies, even though they don't generate as much pressure, they have a higher level of interest in the Indonesia, which makes them a relatively powerful player in terms of being able to allow a play to be pushed through or not. Stifling a play for an extended period of time makes eventual intervention cheaper, can negotiate powers off of stifling intervention. So you want to go for Brunei, Dutch East Indies stifles. You can't get through the stifle without significant expenditure. You negotiate with Dutch East Indies. You agree to send them something for them to leave the escalation for a certain number of years, and then you escalate without them getting involved, and you get Brunei. It's an arms race of who expends more resource or negotiation of how to split. And it's expensive to pie thumb without stifling. So if you do not say, no, you can't do that, also it's more expensive to intervene in someone's play down the line. So you have to, being more like transparent about this type of thing is going to be easier. It also makes sense increasing escalation for one invaded if they occupy homeland. Yeah, maybe this is the way to do it, is if a front gets established in an area where you have a higher tier of interest, you can now commit that level of troops there. I think that's actually maybe the way you would solve it. How would you deal with conscript scamming with no intention of using them, just to raise your military cap? Conscripts would be a way smaller percentage that you could use. Or conscripts would just generally upset your people a lot more. In terms of their internal pressure. Cultural acceptance could also affect costs of escalation and also joining, so it's cheaper to stifle plays against your culture or accepted cultures, and it's harder to escalate against accepted cultures, this type of stuff. You could join the escalations of others on their side, and so this also allows for the potential of a slow brewing type of thing, where Prussia puts a request for Alsace-Lorraine, France says no, and then you have this slow ticking escalation, where it moves from requesting a war goal to threatening, demanding, and going belligerent. Once the progress bar fills, you could choose to escalate it, at which point it will become threatening, and the progress bar will start filling. And if you have massive, great powers on both sides of one of these things, you know, kind of eventually what's going to happen here in terms of what's going on. And this is like the massive political blocks, and they're just getting tied on to some sort of escalation. It's possible you would want to just do regional escalations rather than specific target escalations, or maybe you ask for a specific target, but then it turns into just like a regional escalation, just writ large. Something like that. But you could think of it as going through this process, generate claims, and you could declare war at any point in time. If you skip this, you're going to get a big fat multiplier for war goal cost in terms of infamy and pressure. Escalating someone with lower pressure, and this is either lower pressure generation, or if pressure is a resource you just accumulate or have it in equilibrium, just someone who has less. If you have it as an equilibrium, and someone has spent a bunch of their pressure, being able to escalate against them very quickly is maybe interesting. So... And so this can maybe lead to situations where you can dogpile on someone much easier. I don't know. This needs some fleshing out, but this is kind of some of the ideas here. Treaties to reduce escalation would be fun, like paying a tribute to China. Yeah, decrease escalation level by giving in sort of like a demand, this type of thing. So you, this also would give you, yeah, opportunities to diplomatically resolve stuff. Is there a way to truce break with this system? I think truce breaking should just be allowed. I think that if you break a truce, your people should get really pissed, and the rest of the world should get really pissed, and there should be more means by which the entire world dogpiles you. Being able to join ongoing wars is one of this. I think what should happen is the world should just like total war you if you have 500 infamy. Something like that. One of the problems, though, is you can, like, declare this massive war and still be on low infamy because the declaration doesn't give you the infamy. And I'm not sure what the resolution is for that. Or the declaration gives you a minimal amount of infamy rather than the resolution. And so maybe it's you decide how much infamy you want to spend at the beginning, and then you can't take more than that at the end or something like this. I don't know. I think if you declare, like, declaring bigger wars against bigger powers should just generate more infamy, though, at the outset. But you won't have, like, yeah. Or, this makes it cheaper. Maybe declaring on someone with high pressure is more expensive. If this is an equilibrium, someone who is thumbing a lot of pies will be cheaper to declare on. If you move your fleets or mobilized armies to a region also contribute to escalation. Maybe? I think that people should get upset if you are mobilizing a lot already. I don't like the idea that you can circumvent the cost, so maybe troop movement will increase escalation, but it'll cost you infamy. The opponent should be able to de-escalate by spending the pressure, but then it gets progressively more expensive to do that. Yeah. Well, the idea is that there's this, where I think I have this arms race. Yeah, you can tit for tat with people. Or you can apply more and more pressure. So the idea is that a lot of smaller countries will not be able to stop the war via pressure. But also, if you have a high enough interest level, it should be very hard to stop it with pressure. So if you're both involved, or if you're involved and you're decking on someone existential, if they have enough pressure, they should just be able to endlessly stop you. But if you're both existential, it should not be possible to, like, endlessly stop you. But yeah, arms race, for more, who expends the more resources to stifle you. You can stifle plays that are declared on you. Truces should also de-escalate, no? Yes, yes. I think when you resolve a war, that should just reduce the escalation to 0. And then there's internal pressure that is substantive. Population should be a significant force to disincentivize wars that they aren't interested in, so more jingoistic and nationalistic pops will mind less. Radicalism and maybe devastation, too. Currently, radicalism just doesn't have as much teeth as I'd like, but if there was maybe a protest mechanic that contributed to devastation or could cause a general strike, then that would have a lot more teeth. Especially, like, this would... the protest mechanic, if you go 500 infamy, just causing your country to collapse, even if you have the capability militarily to fight the world, should also maybe be a thing. Right? There's currently, I think, the level of internal pressure is just like, there's not really internal pressure tied to infamy right now in that substantive a way, other than the territory you take has higher, like, people upset rating. I forget what it is. There should be an interesting way to signal states of the AI you want to take, as it is a way to prevent tension. I think the system is already in EU4. Yeah, so the system is in EU4. I like that system. But I think, yeah, I do like that system in EU4. I'm so used to typing 5 now. Jingoism increases your mobilization commitment, so it allows you to contribute more pops and decreases pop dissatisfaction with the war. Nationalism decreases the cost of generating interests and allows you to get involved in more things. Growing nationalism, in addition to or in concert with growing interests and decreased levels of pops that can be colonialized. Although if you colonialize the pops, then they stop generating as much pressure. Maybe. But the point is the growing level of nationalism and interests, and they're drying up places where you can expand, drives an eventual great war. So one of the ideas here is that you can't get total wars between GPs that don't have shared interests very easily. Like Brothers War, you can get a war there, but it's very hard to get someone, like Great Britain probably is only interested in North-South Germany. So Great Britain, if they get involved, they can't contribute much troops. And so it'll be mainly regional, like, existential for both the two brothers, but additional forces from other people are a lot more muted in terms of their abilities. Or if they commit more, then their pops will get upset. Somebody yelling 4? What the fuck? Okay, back to this. And culture power also increases pressure, and so I think there should be a cultural system as well. We didn't flesh that as much. We'll get to it in a sec, though. Intervening in unjustified conflicts lowers infamy or dramatically reduces general pressure pool, so you can accrue less infamy later. You maybe should be given pressure for helping people out when you aren't getting something in return for it. Intervening is cheaper based on relations towards who you're helping / the length of alliances, because intervening should have a cost on pressure. But the idea is you have these moving values that kind of make the game a little bit more dynamic in terms of what your political interests are and this type of stuff. And also, you can create, like, progressions. Like, I really like the idea of going for a treaty port in Southeast Asia as a prelude to subjugating Siam, rather than just be like, oh, well, why would I make a treaty port if I want to subjugate Siam? What about added war goals? I think that the war goals should be decided on resolution. I think setting the war goals ahead of time is kind of silly. I think that you have to declare what type of war it is and what the scope of the war is. And if the scope is declared in a particular area, then you're going to have a level of involvement and mobilization. Trying to take anything that's beyond that level, that tier, let's say, of war goal, or that is in an area where you don't have a high enough level of interest. So if you're Great Britain, right, and you declare an involved war, then you shouldn't be able to take, like, the target should matter too. Like, the thing is, you shouldn't be able to take something that's existential off of France if you declared an involved war. Okay, so you declare a scope for the target, and if you declare involved war in an area you have involved level of interest on France, then you can only go for involved war goals, or war goals where you have... Maybe it's the scope of the target's interest. So if you declare an involved war, you can only take stuff off of France that is of this tier and also of this level of interest. So you can't take anything off of them that they view as existential, or it's just a massive amount of infamy if you try and do it. Just like prohibitively a large, like 5x per tier. So moving 2 tiers would be like either 10x or 25x. Which functionally, let's say that that's not something you can ever do. And so, yeah. Scope is based on the target's level of interest, I would guess. Let's add a... with your war goals... So if you don't have a high level of interest, it's still more expensive, but you declare a scope based on that there. I guess it's kind of combining the two. This can be figured out though. The overall idea I think is in place. You see the UK participating in the Sepoy Mutiny with this system. Maybe treated as them having an alliance. I think the UK has a really high level of interest in India, though, because they do a lot of trade and stuff through them, and you could start them off with like a controlling level of interest. And so if the UK can mobilize 60% of their troops for the Sepoy Mutiny, that's pretty substantive. Okay, so on to culture, which we were less prepared for doing. But maybe similar to movements, various culture groups generate power, more things to do around culture. Morgan wrote comes to mind. These are the main ideas. Culture that can be an indicator of success and something to play for, so it's not just GDP. Tie-ins with cultural trait, maybe. Theme of increasing nationalism and tension helps recognition and is stifled by recognition. Or lack of. Let's put lack of in there. So cultural traits give bonuses, and let's say you have a pie of where your pops are oriented culturally. So anytime you have one value, it is coming at the expense of another value. So pushing stuff in a particular direction to get particular bonuses will have certain outcomes. So having one value come at the expense of the other, is IG's culture and acceptance will heavily influence. Or what IGs the pop belongs to, maybe with weight given to a certain profession, or based on wealth. So academics maybe influence it more than laborers, say. We have a couple examples of values. Nationalism and egalitarianism, it helps with expansion. Egalitarianism maybe lets you push laws easier. I think that you should maybe be able to generate both of these simultaneously, but they should maybe impede with each other. Or... having high antagonist values on both sides increases unrest. So if you have like 30% of your pops nationalistic and 30% egalitarian, you're gonna have a problem, right? you're going to have a lot of tribalism and discord within your nation. You could have industrious or economy orientation, maybe giving construction throughput, construction efficiency or throughput on your stuff. Notably, this would be kind of the reward, perhaps, for being less warfare-oriented, because jingoism decreases the penalties for being at war, and they increases nationalism. And waging wars increases jingoism. Losing wars decreases jingoism. So, and I suppose winning wars also would increase it. And so, if you engage in a lot of wars, your jingoism will rise, your nationalism will rise, and this will eat into all your other values or your ability to accumulate advantages in other areas. Maybe something for revanchism, but I didn't have something in mind. How can the Austrian Mobilization in reaction to the Crimean War be modeled as they were on peace? I don't know too much about the Austrian Crimean War, or enough to really comment, I don't think. I think you could have, if you have certain thresholds of antagonist values where this causes issues, and this causes devastation, but now it's starting to step on the toes of political movements, so I don't know how I feel about that. I think you should have, like, political movements. Or Austrian mobilization in reaction to the Crimean War. They were at peace with Russia. I don't know enough about the situation to comment on it. But you could have a free speech value. Affects research influenced by freedom of the press, which I think is kind of going to be a big deal. Artistry improved by literacy. Science orientation improved by literacy. Decadence affects minimum SOL, probably is the way you'd want to do it. And these are influenced and affected by political movements, or influenced and influenced by political movements. We have freedom of information / press / journalism. I think having journalists and developing this type of stuff is maybe interesting, where controlling the culture is harder with free speech, but free speech maybe lets you get certain cultures a little bit easier, this type of thing, or has other trade-offs, or just more research. There are journalistic movements for particular cultures. So there would be journalistic movements somewhere. Radio should accelerate information spread. Literacy and SOL affect cultural engagement. Maybe literacy amplifies all the bonuses and penalties. So having higher global literacy maybe lets you get more out of your culture. Internationalist, isolationist. Yeah, that's a good one. To some extent, that's kind of stepping on the toes of nationalism. But nationalism has to do with the exceptionalism, and internationalism is just like the level of involvement. Nationalism drives independence movements in your own nation, so if you're very nationalistic, the other people will want to break free more often. So if you're very nationalistic Austria, Hungary was more likely to want to break free. Increases the ability to expand, just generally. Exceptionalism. And for the arts and sciences, we're kind of thinking of them, thinking through Morgan Road here, where you have characters for arts and sciences that drive accomplishments in the era, and is a metric by which you can kind of track or think of progress. They compete in sciences, arts, and sport, and you generate kind of a legacy as well as competence in these areas. If I recall correctly, it was a way to prevent further escalation. It was UK plus France plus Piedmont plus Ottomans versus Russia. This was the one event that broke the starting alliance of Austria and Russia. So, in terms of this system, like what you described, that would be all these powers intervening and stifling. and their combined stifling just makes it so Russia just can't realistically escalate. Because whenever you're stifling, you're also indicating that you're going to get involved in the war. And if you don't stifle and then you get involved in the war is going to be much more expensive for you to get involved in. But if you do stifle, then it's going to be a lot cheaper for you to thumb the pie. Seems like you're expanding the shit. The sheet? Yeah, we did get a little bit done. Welcome back, Ivalo. But I think we're going to be done for now. We have to kind of spend the rest of the day, which we don't have too much left of, because we've been going to bed really early and waking up really early, getting ready for tomorrow. But just wanted to get some of my ideas out here. We might have a more fleshed out video on these types of things, but now my ideas are public information, so I will be able to talk about them. Mega update for 2025. We'll see, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know exactly what they're going to be into, or this type of thing. And if they do tell me anything, I almost certainly won't be able to talk about it. So, yeah, I think I'll stay live for another minute, maybe answer any questions. Seeming like people are kind of cruising out as it stands anyways. And then we'll be on our way. We could maybe find someone to raid. Karasek is streaming, but he's streaming in German. The classic. Maybe we don't need to raid anyone. But it looks like we're having no last minute questions. Give you guys like 1 second. That's supposed to be a tongue. It looks like a cigarette. No, I'm canceled. Alright. Maybe make it red. That's not gonna work. I would need transparent red. Alright. So, I think we're gonna call it. Thanks for coming out. If you guys have any comments or this type of stuff, you can leave comments on the video. This is maybe going to be discussion-heavy stream VOD, if there was going to be one, because it's just kind of us looking through Microsoft Word and kind of thinking through this type of thing. But really, I think that there's like a lot like hinging on like cultural stuff, because I wanted culture to also affect economics and this type of stuff. That is, I would really love to see a system like this, but I do think that a system like this for like the escalation of war specifically is a lot more maneuver heavy and is also a lot more opaque to the player. So from a player experience, the experience is better. And then also this can lead to a lot more dynamic like expansion considerations where like going for Persia maybe makes sense if you're playing Russia, but maybe it doesn't make sense if you're playing Austria or France or like this type of stuff. And what expansions are good are a little bit more dynamic and this type of thing. And you can maybe even have like games unfold where the same thing isn't meta over and over again. So one way to make it impossible to complete stifling is making the multiplier and escalation additive. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking you could just, like, escalate over their stifle, like, repeatedly, just by spending more pressure, but maybe that's the way to do it, is just make it more and more additive, whereas the escalation's multiplicative. So maybe put a note in there. Makes a lot of sense. But I do like the idea that you can just keep contributing more juice. And if it's, one of the problems is if stifling is multiplicative, then multiple commitments of pressure are going to be a lot more effective. Because they will have increasing efficacy rather than, like, the diminishing efficacy. If you're tit for tatting. Maybe you could have it where, the stifle only applies to the current level of escalation. So if your escalation progress base is 1, hey, Shuri Kid, thank you for the 18 months. Wow. Oh, the notification thing. I hope you're still in here. Thank you so very much. Man, are you... It's either you or Joe Pro, who's been my longest sub. Thank you so very much for the tier 1. And Paparoid, thank you for the follow, Big Nice. But yeah, we are going to be going to Spain. Or, sorry, Sweden. It is very exciting. You're still here? Thank God. Thank you so very much. Wow, Karasek raided me? I was just thinking of raiding him. No, not like this. Very excited to be meeting you, though later this week. We were just, like, wrapping up. I guess we can broad strokes go through it. Hope your stream was good. Karasek was just playing multiplayer, but I am not sure... He won. Wait, what? It should be possible to halt escalation if you're very invested and they're not. Yikes. Yes, it's gonna be great. Yeah, I'm excited. This Karasek is I think he's the only like non-English primary content creator that's gonna be there. He's speaking German, so what is it? What's German for hello? Is it hallo? I forget. But hello, all Karasek streamers. Or raiders. But we were thinking through, I guess we'll just briefly go through it for the raiders. We were thinking through a different system for the diplomatic interests and also escalating of war and like a rework of specifically the Diplo play system. And the idea is you have a resource of diplomatic pressure that you expend to do various things. And I'm thinking probably it operates as an equilibrium, so you will trend back towards that. Spending a lot of it will leave you vulnerable, because declaring wars on someone with low pressure is cheaper, and on both infamy and pressure, and it's some sort of combined version of both the resources that I think would be ideal. Paparoid, thank you for the new Prime subscription. Big nice. Welcome, welcome. And so you have this new resource. You use it to declare wars, and your costs, rather than just being throttled only by recognized, unrecognized, and population, instead get filtered through an updated interest mechanic where there's levels of interest. And the higher the level you have, this unlocks new war goals you can declare, or war goals you can go for, in the area, and it also unlocks how much you can mobilize. So some place around the world that you're not very interested in, you can't mobilize everything. It's just going to be a much smaller type of thing, and that there's just an underlying theme as well that goes with the interest that you are slowly generating tension. As more and more of the GPs have higher and higher interests, this allows for higher and higher levels of mobilization and commitment amongst the GPs, but also there'll be a cultural mechanic of nationalism that also drives your ability to go for this, because this grows interests more. As the European powers become more nationalistic, they grow more interests, and the large overlapping interests make it easier for there to be a massive war. With your interests, you have, this throttles all of your costs for everything. And then when you declare a war, you don't want to declare it right away. Instead, you want to operate through, or well, there's some various things for increasing interests. It generates like total amount of pi per week. But it's easier to generate interests. Like if you have treaty ports, it's harder to generate interests if you don't have anything going on. It'll be hard to generate interests in China at high levels, making it difficult to conquer Chinese territory, for example. But then you start escalating. And you start off with just peace, and then you request a war goal. And if you just declare a war outright without going through the escalation, way more expensive on the infamy. Maybe that's okay if they're unrecognized, and it's not that big a deal, but declaring on someone big is going to be tough if this is the case. And so you escalate through the tiers, and as you escalate through the tiers, they can give in, or they can try and stifle your play, or someone else can try and stifle your play. And if you're belligerent, you can just declare the war, and you can get the cheapest price in terms of pressure and infamy, or maybe just pressure for your war goal. Other people can attempt to stifle your play, though, decreasing your progress towards escalation, which happens as a progress bar. And so their ability to intervene is determined by their influence in the region, or their level of interest in the region. And so someone like the Dutch East Indies, who has a high level of interest in Indonesia, can maybe stifle relatively well, even though they won't have a lot of pressure relative to Great Britain, because they have a higher level of interest there. And so you will be jockeying for position in different areas. And so the idea is like you have easier places to go for geographically based on who you're starting as, and different places to defend. And also you can slowly generate interest. Like maybe for Siam, if you were going to subjugate Siam, maybe now it makes more sense to first get a treaty port on them and then subjugate them. Also, you have examples like the Monroe Doctrine, where maybe that's a journal entry where we got the wrong journal entry, where the U.S. generates more interest in the Americas and decreases interest everywhere else, which makes it so that they can stifle plays easier in the Americas, making it harder for Europeans to operate there, but it's harder for them to operate in other places and this type of thing. But you slowly escalate, and then you get decreasing costs, and it moves up the tier. Also, stifling requires pressure and resources as well. And if you stifle, it gets easier to intervene in the war later. Also, you can just always join wars. So, and then also, I think you should be pressured by your internal politics and culture a little bit more. If you go over your mobilization level, this should cause radicalism and also devastation, maybe. I think there should probably be a protest mechanic, and maybe this is what leads to devastation or even a general strike, which is a pretty nasty event if you just get massive negative throughput. And then we have ideas for other cultures maybe affecting mobilization commitment and this type of stuff. If you're more jingoistic, your pops let you mobilize more. If you're more nationalistic, you generate interest faster, which again contributes to the European powers, or like the building world tension. Also had a few ideas on culture, that there would be cultural traits that they give bonuses. These are kind of the broad strokes idea. It maybe operates very similar to political movements. There's things to do around culture similar to the Morgan wrote mod, like arts and sciences, individual characters there. You can progress in science and art as an indicator of success. You can maybe have tie-ins with cultural traits, where you're... where, like, currently there's not too much of bonus for other than acceptance, and so you can maybe have some more stuff going on there. Again, theme of increasing nationalism and tension, and then recognition helps your culture as well. But we have ideas like maybe you can have a more economy-oriented society that increases throughput or construction or this type of stuff, but you have a total pie of culture, so it's a percentage pie. So as you get more jingoistic, it gets harder and harder to have these other things. So this is a sort of penalty for being at war. Being at war increases your jingoism. Losing wars increases pacifism, maybe, or decreases jingoism. Winning wars increases jingoism. This contributes to nationalism, pushing people in that direction. Literacy maybe pushes them towards the arts and sciences, so you have pressures in other directions, this type of stuff. And then We did have some other thoughts. We're not going to go through it line by line, though. I'm not sure how much of the people from the Twitch... Let's see how much are even in here. But hopefully that was... I didn't want to just end as soon as Karasek raided. That's just kind of what we were doing today over the course of 3 hours. Is kind of expanding on this, talking through it, this type of thing. Would really love to see the Diplo play reworked. Really have some significant problems with it, like the tick below zero mechanic. And so this was some of our thoughts on the matter. We've got one last comment and then we're going to call it. I imagine the system also gives a player in Siam less irritation when GB comes over and declares for protectorate in half their territory. Because they can continually try and stifle it, and if GB doesn't have that much interest... I mean, GB should be able to force it through, just because GB has way more pressure than Siam. But maybe GB doesn't go directly for subjugation, because they don't want to pay that much infamy, and so they just go for a treaty port instead. Thank you for summarizing. Oh man, you stayed? I would have assumed you would get up to bathroom or eat. Usually that's what I want to do when I'm, like, getting done streaming. But, yeah, I didn't want to just end it, like, because I was literally talking about raiding you, like, 1 or 2 minutes before, but then I was like, oh, the language bit, much more of your viewers speak English than my viewers speak German in terms of proportion, I think. So, I've raided you a couple times, though. This is some of the thoughts I had on the matter. One of the reasons why I wanted to put this out publicly is so I could talk about it publicly. Just in case we hear something about these types of things, I can expand on these ideas. And talk about my ideas specifically and not paradoxes, because if I learn anything about what they think, I'm probably not allowed to share. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Take care, everyone. I'm going to get ready for my trip tomorrow. So, and then Karasek, I'll be seeing you in... I think you arrive on Thursday, so I'll see you on... See you Thursday evening? So, anyways. Or you might even commute there, because you're Germany, right? It's like an hour and a half. You could even go same day. I assume you come the day before. But anyways, I digress. Bye-bye, everyone. We'll say bye to the YouTubers. And then we'll say goodbye to the